And these idiots in the media, vampires, sitting there smiling, delivering the message, vampires, like zombies, just go, oh, okay, yeah. They're nothing but meat puppets with mouths and vocal cords. Right now, the Fed is giving the public a large tube of KY jelly for when it comes time to bend over. Tom Keene's a moron. We could take the analogy from The Exorcist to, vampires, a wreath of garlic around you when he's talking. You won't get infected with the total bullshit that comes out of his mouth.
Well, I'm going to always advocate peaceful means. I do have two 10-ounce silver bullets, two 10-ounce silver bullets, two 10-ounce silver bullets.
How the fuck are they defining inflation? The money supply is increasing at a parabolic rate. So it's the epitome of Orwellianism. You just make shit up and put labels on it, and that's what it is. Vampires. On the chance that something might seep into my brain that he says, I'll be more dumb for having listened to it. I mean, this is just idiotic. These guys are moronic. Bullshit, Bill. You're a moron.
Dave, I feel like you're holding back today.
I'm just tired of this crap. They're doing a brilliant job. They're like magicians, these vampires, deflecting your attention away from what's really going on, okay? Vampires. Like, it's good for the economy that I pay more next week for something that I need to have than I'm paying this week. That's good. How is that possibly good? And the banks are starting to collapse again. They're nothing but meat puppets with mouths and vocal cords.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Week in Review with the one and only Doooovid. Thank you so much for joining us on this Sunday evening. Started a little earlier this week. I've been busy as usual, making my clips. That one is from some pundits, some hardened traders who have mostly left the stocks market to invest in physical silver. So it's been interesting to track what's been going on in those markets because commodity price inflation could have some pretty serious consequences for society and the economy in general. So great to see Ricardo, Elliot, Howie. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here. I'll hand it over to you, Doovid. Introduce what I'm sure will be a great show.
You're welcome, Jennifer. Good to be back. Eventful week. I guess, I had a lot of stuff for last week that I thought would have been interesting to talk about, but I guess like once we had Howie on, he largely kind of like stayed on the show till it was over. So it wasn't like a good period for me to just go through random interesting things.
That was hilarious when you froze on Luke's for like a microsecond and he didn't answer fast enough for what was about what Week in Review is about. It's like we spent an hour and a half giving Howie tough love about his romantic life. That's what we did on the last Week in Review.
Yeah, because it's not necessarily structured or planned, and there's a lot of ideas. I mean, so obviously there's streaming and the advancement of our ideas and creating intellectual community, and just the intellectual forum of people to talk about interesting ideas. And the bias that me and Jennifer both have, various ideas that we're researching and pushing, and when within that streaming in general, just meeting interesting personalities, having a regular show with the co-host is important. It's good streaming protocol to be active in the game. You really need to at least once a week have a regular appearance, and just a week in review to keep up with things. But like circles have changed and different people come and go, and so the main driving force of the show obviously is Doovid and Jennifer promoting our ideas, although it is interesting to widen our circles and have new personalities. But the schedule this week, because I didn't end up going to the Hare Krishna temple, I'm going to end up we'll hopefully discuss and even show video Gopal Krishna Goswami has been diagnosed with COVID-19. Unfortunately, health is okay. I mean, he's had the symptoms. He's not been put into the hospital, but I mean, God forbid, we know Bhakti Charu Swami died of COVID-19, and we showed that on the stream. And it's about time. Me and Jennifer, I think, have done 5 streams now on COVID-19 on my channel, including the one with JF where he came on my channel. But it's probably about time for another update and say COVID-19 did not go anywhere. Gopal Krishna Goswami, God forbid, has COVID-19. India, there's been a huge uptick in COVID-19. You look at practices like Gopal Krishna Goswami generally was pretty careful, but like in India, did like they always wear the mask? Were they completely careful to to follow the protocol like in China? Maybe not, or then saying it like at what point does evolution do these sciences like of course it's just evolution, it happens like this naturally, versus saying like no, like what kind of bioweapons effect. Normal schools are not opening. I did not go to the Hare Krishna temple this week largely because of COVID-19. It's not like we didn't pay together in public and have food with the risk of COVID-19. So thank God we could talk about these things and we can review. Jennifer is available early, so hopefully we'll have a good week in review. Doovid will get to cover some of the things I want to say. Hopefully if Jennifer finds it interesting, we could talk about it. If not, just kind of put it out there for anybody who watches these and follows the ideas. And certainly Jennifer, any updates or ideas that she wants to put forward, hopefully the time will be there, and maybe because we start early, we'll even be done with that by like 9. And if other people want to come on, or we could end it early, or just play it by ear. But you say like we can review kind of is just like a play it by ear, kind of like event promotion in general, that it depends on who shows up, and you could pre-plan a few things, but it has to be kind of open to like it's an event and you don't ever know who's going to show up, even though you might have certain people expected, and the expected people to behave according to an expected pattern, but there's still like a good stream that's expecting to get more than the 5 people watching we have now. Has to be designed for people just to show up, and new people to be showing up, just like cult craft. And there was some stuff like in analytics and maybe more mathematical stuff that hopefully I'm going to convince Jennifer to take more serious and look at. So with that, I still do, I guess, my week in review. Not much besides appearing on Luke's channel a few times. And I only really appeared on Luke's channel Friday afternoon and today a little bit, and it was kind of quick, where Luke didn't really seem in the mood too much to talk about Judaism. It's like he invited me on, and then like it's like I'm forcing him to talk about Judaism, and then he's just like, okay, like I'm going to move on. So we'll talk about that in a bit. But besides that, that's my whole week in review. I had a chant organized, but if Jennifer wants to open up or say anything, please, floor is yours.
Thanks, Doovid. Yeah, I'm sorry about my audio. People in the audience were complaining. I have attempted to reroute it, so hopefully it's a bit better. I don't know if you can tell, Doovid, if it's any better. I've just been, studying diligently and try to get a feel for where people are at, and always looking for inspiration about new ideas to write about, and getting some practice. I was on Claire's last night, getting some practice sort of explaining things to a lay audience. I do enjoy the opportunity to meet new people, and there was a new guy on the stream, but it was another one of these, I hate to say Nazi LARPers, but I just find like I pretty much just want to put the kibosh on talking about the World War II stuff / the Aryan invasion theory. I kind of want to put that to bed, but I realized it's quite a foundational pillar to a lot of people's beliefs. I was actually just listening to a video on BitChute, which for some strange reason had all the comments disabled about the Aryan invasion theory. And I mean, it's even stupider than you'd think. Like it's going into like aliens and giants, and it's really crazy. Like you gotta wonder, where's this stuff even coming from? But yeah, that's what I had. So I've got your singing. I put singing rabbi. I'm not sure how you would describe the intro clip for today. but I know Doovid usually does a little chant, but today he wanted to hand it over to another expert. Did you want to tell us about that before I play the opening chant?
Yeah, so because it's the the Jewish New Year coming up, and the theology of the Day of Judgment, and kind of the culmination of karma into the end of the year and beginning of a new year. Yeah, I thought I'd switch from we've been doing Hare Krishna for the last few weeks, but the structure and nature of the science mathematics of the chant were pretty similar. I was trying to demonstrate between these Hare Krishna tunes and the Hasidic tunes, and also the nature of chanting in terms of what I'm going to call cult craft, although I could use other language to describe it if people are uncomfortable with the expression cult craft. And we've discussed that many times, saying historically, before in the 1960s, when the term cult developed negative connotations in America, in the West, or worldwide. But before that, cult was probably the most common, sort of say technical term that would have been used. But this tune, so this is the famous Lubavitch Rebbe that of cultcraft in terms of an international movement is probably bigger than any of the Hindu swamis. Saying like 4,000 synagogues around the world successfully. Vince Bruno is always talking about the accomplishments of the Lubavitch Rebbe, the honors that have been officially written into the books of government documents. But the Lubavitch Rebbe had a resource, the rail, like a diaspora, the fact that that it was a multi-generational dynasty going back at least 7 generations, and had, so to say, tens of thousands of followers that had lived in these communities in Europe that were destroyed during World War II. And then the community ended up largely relocated into Brooklyn, New York. And the Rebbe had the strategy of saying, okay, it's World War II, and now there's tens of thousands of these World War II refugees, survivors of what happened in Europe, in Brooklyn. So the Rebbe said, dedicate your life to reestablishing Judaism, but just go all over the world and start a center in all these far off places. And whatever the karma was, that was pretty successful. And in reality, like Hindu, so to say, cults like that, there's actually hundreds of prominent Hindu gurus that have centers all around the world. And within that, chanting is a big deal. And these tunes are believed like that's part of the cult, so to say. Like the chanting of these tunes is part of the ritual, and because like it's a cult craft of a religious scriptural obligation of the best way to interact. It's not necessarily coming in and saying, hello, how are you doing? It's coming in and chanting all together with full strength. And it's also like a virtue signal of membership. Like you'll see in the video very quickly, once I stop rambling, saying that's the virtue signal, that when everyone's chanting, like if you're part of it, you're chanting. And if you're not chanting, you're embarrassed or you think it's silly, you're probably not really part of what's going on, because the chanting is like, the virtue signal. And there's a evening factor also, that like a hierarchical, that at least during the chanting in a voice or a certain manner, everybody's at least, so to say, equal, that all the voices. However, we go into the Hasidic philosophy of chanting and music for years. It's an endless topic, but and just notice how everybody's completely quiet when the rabbi walks in, stands until the rabbi sits down, and then everyone sits down, and then the rabbi doesn't say anything for a sec, absolute silence, and he calls out the name of a tune, and then everybody starts chanting this tune that is known. And that's how the opening, and I have a video that hopefully also will show of Gopal Krishna Goswami and the cult craft. That's actually very common practice, and there's spiritual reasons to it. So this tune is also a more complicated 4-part structure, meditation on God's name. And I specifically want to show this video for even the musical technique of the chant, where the first part seems like it's 2 different parts, but really the first part Says I yeah 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 yeah. I'm not going to sing it. I just got the video do it. And then there's the second part that leads into the high part, and the repetition of the second part to mirror the four-letter name of God, but within the third part mirroring the highest part, like in the meditation, where the first letter of God's name is like the lower material realm, the second letter is the transition to the higher heavens, and the third part representing the heavens, and then the fourth part representing the transition back down to material reality. And then the chanting technique, which is actually pretty common among all religions and various things, is that the rabbi will just repetitively, with the whole congregation, repeat the high part of the high part, which is interesting. We talk about it also. So please, Jennifer, if you're ready, and this is the famous Lubavitch rabbi to say that it has to be that people have to act in accordance, that their leader, their guru, their rabbi could be the most important person in the whole world. So that your guru, your rabbi, is just a flesh and blood person like everybody else, but is accorded the respect that say, like, no, this person, my rabbi, like in all reality is probably factually the most important person in all of material reality.
And there we go. Thanks for sharing that, Doovid. Now back to the regular show. What did you think of the layout there? I even got you in the background. I'm still working it out to try to figure it. You're still muted, Doovid.
Yeah, pretty good. Thanks for playing the whole video. And just so that these tunes that I'm singing, some of them are famous tunes, and you can see like that those were so tunes. People watch familiar about the Lubavitch and saying what do all the rabbis, what do the people around the world do when we gather, and the reality is we don't really conspire or have speeches. We chant because that's what we do. We're a religious group. And when we all come together, the main activity is chanting. And Hasidim are unique in chanting just tunes without words. I mean, most of the chanting does include words in Hebrew mantras, but just chanting melodies, pretty uncommon. I don't see that too often. Like the Hare Krishnas we chant. And did you have that video of Gopal Krishna Goswami?
Yeah, the one you sent me earlier that you wanted me to screen share. I can play that right now if you like.
Yeah, just a second.
It's going to take a second to load.
Yeah, this is the leader of the Hare Krishna movement that not unlike the Lubavitch Rebbe, was a different nature of a leader of a religious movement. But Gopal Krishna Goswami is an international preacher that travels around the world, and helps sets up temples, and God forbid right now he's just diagnosed with COVID-19. But you see the similarities, like he comes in, everybody's silent, and it's Indian culture, so actually people bow and throw flowers at him. He actually walks right up to me. I'm filming, and to speak to the pujari, one of the priests of the temple that I'm standing right next to. But in terms of like the cult craft, if you want to go ahead and play it, but you could see kind of the cult craft in terms is basically the same.
Okay, sounds good. We'll put the audio in. Anyone's interested to listen, just let me know when you want to turn it off.
Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
That's probably enough. You don't have to play the whole thing.
All right, so I've taken the audio off there so we can continue on with the show. So yeah, this is going back to 2013.
Yeah, so I
Very
mean, Gopal
interesting.
Krishna Goswami has been coming to Detroit every year for decades, and even like I could tell stories. I hope he survives COVID-19 and doesn't have any holdup from it. But Detroit, the temple was founded in the 70s. Gopal Krishna's it goes through a period of decline in the late 80s, and really on its last threads. And Gopal Krishna Goswami every year has come to Detroit for probably over 30 years or 25 years. Through the worst times when he was taking a train from I think Toronto. I think the travel route of Gopal Krishna Goswami used to be he'd visit the temple in Toronto, and then he'd take a train to come to Detroit. And a very intelligent man. I used to ask questions. I used to go to his classes, recorded. He put some of them on YouTube. And after his classes, like the cult craft, like the video of the Lubavitch Rebbe, after the chanting, the rabbi probably spoke for maybe even an hour, a long period of time, maybe interspersed by more chanting. But for the cult craft, in order, so to say, for one person to give a message to everybody else, and everybody to kind of like just be silent, not talk, and try to focus and pay attention to what the person speaking is saying. There really is a huge benefit to preceding that by group chanting. And as I was saying, like Hasidim Hindus, all sorts of religions, all do the practice of preceding an important speech by group chanting, even secular versions of sporting events and these various things, and also the science of collective consciousness. So it's very, very interesting. There's a lot of things we talk about, but I wanted to start out with a tune, the science of chanting, and this week maybe play a video of the Lubavitch Rebbe so people just see kind of these tunes in effect, and also Gopal Krishna Goswami this week, that really a great man spreading Vedic culture all around the world. Personally, just traveling one temple after the next, helping set up temples and make sure they operate properly, and training devotees and initiating devotees, and taking questions from people like Doooovid who just want to know more about the Vedas. In fact, the reason I got Srimad Bhagavatam was through the urging of Gopal Krishna Goswami, who urged me to read the literature, which I did. I did read the literature largely through the encouragement of Gopal Krishna Goswami, who, even though has thousands of disciples all over the world, had time to answer my questions when he came to Detroit. So hopefully he recovers and is right back into service.
Awesome. Well, we'll keep an eye on that for sure. I have another video from you here. I can't read it, but I think we talked about it, and it's a protest. These anti-Netanyahu protests. I just heard about them. Apparently, they've been going on for a while.
Oh yeah. Can you, if you put it in the background where I could talk over it, or is that possible?
Oh yeah, I can do that right now.
Okay. Yeah. So this is an interesting news story, and it's also related to Chassidus and some of the tunes that I chant. And this is the famous Rebbe Nachman of Breslov, who historically some of my ancestors were probably followers of this rabbi in the Ukraine. Rebbe Nachman is a great grandson of the Baal Shem Tov. And Rosh Hashanah, the upcoming holiday, in his lifetime, it was popular that people thought that good things happened to them if on the Jewish New Year's they went to Rebbe Nachman and prayed with him. And then after Rebbe Nachman died, the custom of praying by the place of his grave became very popular, and has been kind of like an unbroken chain since the 1800s. And last year there was well over 30,000 people on the Jewish New Year, went from all over the world to pray at the grave of Rebbe Nachman. It's one of the biggest Jewish events, international events of the whole year. And Rebbe Nachman, kind of like a Hare Krishna type approach, believed in ecstatic chanting. So you always see guys like blasting music and dancing in the street and handing out literature. And we could talk more about the theology, but the interesting politics is it's COVID-19. You can't do a pilgrimage to to Ukraine right now, and Israel right now, God forbid, is having the worst state of COVID-19 breakout that they've had, and Ukraine has closed their borders. But Jews, it's it's a superstitious thing. According to superstition, there is nothing more powerful than making pilgrimage to the Ukraine, to the grave site of Rebbe Nachman, to pray on the Jewish New Year's. And some people are willing to do anything, and the lobby, because it's Israel, and like India, the ultra Orthodox Jews are part of the ruling party with Netanyahu. That Netanyahu, as a political issue, these are protesters, leftists who are protesting, but the Haredim are part of the Netanyahu coalition. But because they want to go to Uman, and the government doesn't want to let them go to Uman because of COVID-19 restrictions, they're protesting Netanyahu now also. And Netanyahu, in order to keep his coalition together, is trying to negotiate a special deal with Ukraine to allow a certain number of people to make the pilgrimage. And from a spiritual perspective, it's honorable the level of sacrifice for a pilgrimage, and it's interesting that Uman is believed to be the site of a Jewish massacre where Jews say as many as 5,000 to 30,000 Jews were massacred in like the over 350 years ago by Ukrainian peasants in some sort of uprising. We talk about the European history. Some of the Ukrainian historians say that the number was likely only a few hundred Jews that were massacred there. But there's been repeated massacres of Jews in this city of Uman because Jews had settled it for, definitely going back hundreds of years. And during various uprisings and pogroms and disputed territory between the Polish and the Ukrainians, that the Jews in the city, God forbid, were sacked multiple times. But despite all of the violence, even in some of the worst times, the pilgrimage to pray at the grave of Rebbe Nachman on the Jewish New Year's was such a high superstition that people were literally willing to risk their life to make this pilgrimage. So I thought it was an interesting thing to see how that plays into current Israeli politics, where Netanyahu is going to have to be like, look, like these Hasidim are part of my coalition. We have to superstition and help them get to the grave to pray by their rabbi. And so, anyone, me and Jennifer have Hindu leanings, obviously. So if people follow Indian land politics, where now Hindus are the ruling party, that's also a very common thing in India in Hindu politics, such things.
Yeah, very interesting. Finally settling on a layout, so I hope you also find it versatile enough. Really enjoy this OBS and sort of get to tell a story in a lot more detail this way. Yeah. So that's what's going on there. It seems very hot. I saw a lot of those people. They look like they were sweating quite a bit. Like, what kind of climate you think that is?
We're in Israel?
Yeah, where these protests were happening. I just kind of was like feeling sorry for them a bit. They just all looked very
It
hot.
might be 100 degrees. I mean, Israel is a Mediterranean summer, August, has a similar climate to America, Canada, with the winter and so it's nearing the end of the summer. But yeah, I mean, it could be in Israel that there's basically clear skies with 100-degree temperatures basically every day.
Oh, okay. Well, you were there for a while.
I'm not sure where you're about that also, but yeah, I'm saying that one thing, Israel basically has clear skies the majority of the summer. I mean, there occasionally be rain or clouds, but generally has a rainy season and a dry season. And during the summer, you could even say most days there's like almost no clouds even.
Okay, so like I'm assuming Detroit weather is pretty similar to like Toronto in the summer. It can get pretty hot. Is it the same thing there, or is it different kind of hot?
We got into the high 90s a few days. You get 90 degree temperature pretty often here. Years ago, we broke 100 a few times, global warming. I remember like years ago, like they used like the local supermarket used to even give away like free stuff when it broke 100, like free cool drinks. But you say yeah, it's unlikely to break 100 here in Metro Detroit, but you could expect it to break 90 degrees at least tens of times over the summer.
John Wolf says Israel is exactly like LA. I've never actually been there, so I was just curious because someone was living in Arizona, or they had like a winter house in Arizona, and they said it was a dry heat, and I don't think I've ever experienced that. I was just a little curious.
Michigan, you would rarely see like a week even in the summer without rain.
Yeah, I mean, there isn't really I guess there's a part of the summer where it's drier, but sustained drought is not something you see very much in that region. Like I'm just
You know, I
thinking,
think in-
Montreal's pretty rainy. It's just by the Fleuve Saint Laurent there, and Ottawa is a valley, and Detroit is on the other side of Windsor, right? And that's pretty much Toronto area. Well, not exactly, but there's the Lake Ontario there. So there's a lot of precipitation from that cycling.
I forget the numbers, but like, yeah, I think in Israel you could expect it in the summer to rain like once a month or something like that. I mean, it's not like it goes the whole summer without raining once, but you know, like it definitely doesn't rain more than once every 2 weeks, maybe even once a month. And your average day is just like clear skies day after day after day. I think California probably gets more rain than that, but I actually just bought a whole bunch of books. Like if you want to talk for a second, I'll bring over some of these books I just ordered.
Sure. Hey, audience! I got into yet another Aryan Kangs debate last night, and I just want it to end. It just seems like it never will. So I've got a pretty good article that sort of goes through it and basically reiterates the stuff that I said. And I mean, there's no actual logic to this argument other than it's a political thing from the 1900s or the 1800s. So yeah, I think I know the evidence stacks up on my side, and the people who are saying that the genetic is a cultural and the linguistic evidence supports Aryan invasion theory don't understand that that's an axiom within that range, the domain of interpretation. So there's no way to disprove an axiom. So obviously, if you assume something off the get-go, you can't unassume it. You can't disprove your assumptions unless you're actually willing to look at the evidence objectively. So yeah, that's that. Are you back, Doooovid? Did you want to take over and talk about the book?
Yeah, I guess maybe full screen me to give me the best chance possible. People could see these titles. So I think I just randomly, maybe it was on Luke, he mentioned a book, and then I looked on Amazon and bought one, and then other ones came up and recommended and ended up getting a whole bunch. And actually there's one more I'm going to show also. So here's a big one with pictures. This one's called Prisoners of Geography, A World Explained in 12 Simple Maps. And this is like the big picture book. So I ordered this book called The Revenge of Geography. No, I'm sorry, I got the wrong book. Prisoners of Geography, 10 Maps That Explain Everything About the World, which is basically just text by Tim Marshall. And then there's a corresponding picture book with actual maps explaining it, but largely the effects of geography on regional events. Here's another one, The Revenge of Geography, what the map tells us about the coming conflicts in the battle against fate. And this will be extremely relevant to Aryan invasion theory because it's really an argument largely based on geography. And then here, American Nations, the history of the 11 rival regional cultures of North America. Colin Woodward, which is kind of showing that different ethnic groups largely filled these historic 11 different regions, and the society and culture that you see today is largely due to these historical migrations of various peoples from different areas to different regions. Here's another book by the same Tim Walls of the 12 maps that explain the world politics, The Age of Walls, which is book 3 of his Politics of Place series, how barriers between nations are changing our world, more on geography, national boundaries, walls, and the role. But all these things are kind of like inclusive precursor type things that would be included in a debate on Aryan invasion theory because it's largely a geographic argument. Here is another one, not only semi-related, but I bought this, I saw this, Losing Control, how left-right coalition black immigration reform and provoked the backlash that elected Trump, which is history of immigration in America. And then I saw randomly, I'd mentioned this guy, Ashish Delela, who wrote books on Vedic cosmology. So he had two more new books. One book called Cosmic Theogony, The Personalization of Nature. And a nice, almost 400-page book. And very interesting, talking about like personalism and the different schools of Hindu theology and structuring the kind of like Shiva Vishnu, Brahma Vishnu Shiva triad. And I put these away. If Jennifer, you want to talk 1 second, I'll show this other book by Ashish Delela that I forgot to bring over. And,
Yeah, so the people are piling on with the Aryan Kang's theory. So here's your problem. Arya
here,
comes
this
from
one also
the-
very
okay, go
interesting.
ahead.
I haven't had a chance to open or look through it yet. The Yellow Pill by Ashish Delela, Conceptual Basis of the Varna System. So very important literature, something me and Jennifer both believe in and talk about quite often. So I'm not sure the angle that this author is taking on, but I bought his book and look forward to reading it.
Awesome. Right, so white superiority is not an Aryan idea. That idea comes from elsewhere. You can probably guess where it comes from. Right. You got it, Ricardo. So obviously that's a, primitive interpretation, right? I mean, I could literally put a theory forward that attributes the decay of human civilization to blue eyes. Because it was like a narcissus trap, people equated it to great accomplishments, but it actually didn't signify anything other than having blue eyes, and then civilization imploded because all these blue-eyed people were like, hey man, we was Kangs. I could do that. Yeah, we got the like genius commentary in the chat here. Varna equals color, Aryans were white. Yeah, it's like this is Super Librix tier argumentation. It's the colors, guys. Right.
Well, people have to have a recognition of how little their opinion on the matter means and how much information you need to know to have a meaningful opinion. You're saying like, oh, I kind of feel like this is probably going to be the truth. And it's like, well, why do you feel that? It's like, well, I don't know. I just feel that way. And so what kind of research or evidence do you have to back up your feelings? Like, well, basically none. Maybe I could look for some and try to find some, even though, probably still won't support my argument, which is unfortunate, but that's, human nature. That's the way that people attempt to make decisions and approach things. So it's not surprising. First, the level of someone who really wants to know the truth, someone who recognizes duty and the implications to action, that knowing the truth. How do I be a good person? How do I fill my duty and obligation in the world? And how does knowing and understanding the material realm, the history of karma, and these various things factor into fulfilling my duty? And also, I forgot to mention, maybe this might even entice Brundle or some expert guest to come on. I wanted to talk about the karma, God forbid, of Kyle Rittenhouse, God forbid, and the shooting there. And I showed the Destiny Vouch debate. There's debates all over. It's one of the hottest topics on the internet right now, and even mainstream politics. Kyle Rittenhouse, God forbid, hero or villain. But I think me and Jennifer could give a unique analysis of just the karma of the escalation of violence to lethal, and a good example to use the multiple truth hypothesis, because there's so many postulates about what happens at the moment of death that you would really need the multiple truth hypothesis to work with all of the various possible karmatic explanations, but would be a good example of the limitations of the material mind and why guys like Destiny, God forbid, in my mind, just made himself sound like an idiot and wasn't capable of understanding basic points that Vaush was pointing out. And this hot topic issue where people can't examine the issue rationally, but have to go about you trying to support their own bias through interpreting effects in the way that supports their current nature of behavior, like the Aryan invasion theory, which is like, I want to kind of believe I'm good. I want to believe that my ancestors accomplished great things, which is a natural bias. So saying like, well, yeah, I mean, if you're light featured or Aryan, just be like, well, yeah, of course, like, why wouldn't I want to believe in Aryan invasion theory? You want to tell me my ancestors are awesome, and you want to tell me my ancestors were less awesome, and there could be different understandings, but at least the bias is obvious in the historical use of the theory for colonialization, that colonialization had to go along with social theories and scientific theories, and Aryan invasion theory was, to some extent, intellectual justification for colonialization. And so it's important, just like, slavery in America and Black culture, Aryan invasion theory, to know like this is the nonsense that God forbid our ancestors were taught in order to justify the horrible sin of colonialization, or however you want to interpret that karma of what this historical karma is, and why it's important to know about the Aryan invasion theory, and why even someone like Howie might stand up and say, yes, I still support that theory, it's true.
Well, what I don't get is how they could possibly think that the evidence supports it. I guess it just means they have no like reasoning ability, and they just believe everything that they read.
Well, I mean, God forbid you just make yourself sound dumb when you wonder at something that like you have to have a false premise to even wonder at, because factually ignorance is the natural condition. You're saying like, I wonder, like if someone like per se had the knowledge of all world history in them, but like no, you filter information from what you're given, and so obviously people only have tiny bits of factual information. So if they're fed a false theory, like evolution, or like a lot of the false theories that are purposely put upon people to control behavior, that like, yes, obviously it's not that far beyond belief that the majority of people believe false theories, because like how the hell are they supposed to know what happened on the other side of the world thousands of years ago?
Yeah, they're just really sure that there were these like white mythical giants that colonized the world, and it's so funny because it's like I get it, like these.
Well,
these
it's not so
myths,
funny. You're saying like, how the hell were you supposed to know what happened on the other side of the world thousands of years ago? It's like, no, like I'm a scholar, I'm smart. Like I could tell you what's in the realm of possibility and what's not in the realm of possibility. And when you say this is in the realm of possibility, you are factually wrong, and I am factually right. And then your average person is like, no, thank you, Jennifer. I don't need you to tell me what's in the realm of possibility or not. Like, like it's the other side of the world thousands of years ago. I'll believe whatever the hell I want.
sure, yeah, but I look at these
And it's not
foundational myths.
surprising. Like, I mean, why would you be surprised? Like, of course, like people believe whatever the hell they want, but, basically always about everything.
Well, the thing is that myths have a truth to them, right? Like myths can only really be myths if they speak to some deeper truth, which usually has its answer in a biological formalism, right? So it's just kind of funny that this idea is something that people.
It's not funny. I'm saying it's an explanation of karma. Like the fact that people believe in a false theory is a factual effect of the cause of karma. So it's like, it's not funny. Like there's a karmatic reason why a certain element of the population believes something that's not true.
Yeah. And it's
I don't see what's funny about it at all. It's saying like,
no, it's
what
not.
could
You're
be
right. It's
surprising
not
about
funny.
it?
It's sad. It's just,
Or even surprising. It's not even sad. I'm saying it's a factual element of the material realm. So it's saying the material realm in and of itself is sad. And it's sad because certain elements, like you're mentioning, are factual conditions of the material realm in order for the material realm to exist.
yeah. I guess it transcends the emotional realm. I was just at a loss for words because I
Well, it's the point of when talking about analyzing
so,
reincarnation in the escalation of violence in the Kyle Rittenhouse case, where some for the spiritual, factual level, emotion may play some some level, but like no, you could intellectually analyze what happened without any emotion. In terms of a judgment, you could be an emotionless judge, an emotionless executioner, or analysis of factual level of karma. We're talking last week about dualism, and where a lot of Vedic, Kabbalistic, Christian scholars, spiritual scholars, necessitate that there's an external force that isn't affected by anything in the material realm that affects the material realm, and that's the spiritual realm. And even explanations like physics and multiple universes or whatever, those are explanations of material phenomenon, and the spiritual phenomenon we believe in still happen and reside outside of the power of these phenomenon. And when you talk about something like death, reincarnation, there's many axioms in spiritual systems to consider. When we talked about John David Ebert and his thing about pairs of souls and it being preordained, that one carnation after other, that people who kill each other, in fact, are pairs of souls that kill each other every generation and every carnation. And sometimes it reverses, so that if one person kills someone else in this lifetime, in the next lifetime, that person will kill the other person. The cycle repeats. So from that perspective, that John Rittenhouse, if he killed two people and injured another, that is indicative of some sort of repetitive reincarnation cycle of souls that have been killing each other back and forth for multiple generations, or that it had to have been preordained, that the power of murder and taking a person's life, God forbid, is not actually within, so to say, what we're going to call a person's free will. So if, God forbid, Kyle Rittenhouse, justified or unjustified, ends the life and killed two other people, that karmatically that he was going to do that had to have been preordained before Kyle's soul took birth in his body. And so these are like scientific axiomatic precursors of multiple concepts of reincarnation. Is there an agreed upon point when the soul enters the material realm, when it's going to leave the material realm, or is it open to the forces? And what is the connection of karma between the soul of the person who kills and the soul of the person who was killed? And so this is actually a spiritual science. God forbid, like all of the major religions have like a codified spiritual explanation for violence and these effects. And even like, the Chinese martial arts and Japanese ninja also include superstitious beliefs about reincarnation and like who kills who and whether it was preordained from previous births and these various things. So I thought it'd be an interesting angle. I'm not sure. Did you want to play a clip from the Destiny vouch debate just to see what like a lower level of interpretation they were on?
Sure. Is this going to be on YouTube? Because I could pull it up.
Well, if you don't have a clip ready, it's probably not worth playing one. But I think it's on Destiny's channel. It's like an hour and a half. So if you don't have a clip lined up, I mean, you could put it in the background so people could see, but it's probably not worth just playing randomly.
I have a very short clip of him getting yelled at that I can play. That I think I pulled it out somewhere. Yeah, well, just give me a couple minutes there.
So they had a debate where, ironically, Destiny was defending Kyle Rittenhouse.
We were shot by...
Wait. No one said he came. No one said he came to kill people. Who the fuck said that? You have no idea if that's true or not.
Who the fuck is talking to me?
This is Destiny, and he doesn't have his
Destiny,
webcam
suck
up.
my dick. Don't ever come in here talking to me stupid like that. You better introduce yourself and announce yourself the next time you decide to address me. Don't ever fucking talk to me like that.
Oh, hey, I'm sorry. Okay, so So I'm Destiny, and I try to make sure that when we talk about breaking news, we're not rattling off some dumbass bullshit that we have no fucking idea what we're talking about. That's what I'm doing tonight.
Destiny, what is
And I'm Nina, and I go through life not being a white piece of shit. Nice to meet you, Destiny. Don't ever fucking address me like that again.
Damn, imagine in your introduction, the most important part of your identity is the fucking race you are. Holy shit. How fucking sad is your life? Oh my god. Holy shit.
And we're back. Yeah, that was that. I that was the only clip I saw of him, and I don't think it's that debate. I think it's just him on some random stream getting yelled at basically by some lady. And yeah, so I've got it playing in the background now. If you want to give some commentary, there's no sound though.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't really impressed with its performance. I have no idea that clip that you played. But just that it's a pretty popular debate. Almost everyone's debating this issue. Destiny, for whatever reason, is a popular internet character who goes forwards on these debates. I didn't largely agree with him, and or think his worldview is even has any attempts at consistency or coherency, and kind of like the fake liberal virtue signal of someone that doesn't really want to help make the world a better place, but has chosen liberalism as a strategy to get ahead. Vaush actually made some interesting altruistic points about the level of can you fire into a crowd? Like, even if you're right and a crowd is unjustifiably about to lynch you and you have a weapon, can you just keep on killing people to defend yourself? And Destiny couldn't even seem to get that point where it's like he couldn't even fathom that there's such a thing, that no, you can't just kill as many people as are necessary to defend yourself, which is probably just a sign of his kind of lack of character, which I guess that kind of what makes him cute or a popular streamer. He's more a gamer. He might have some knowledge to win a few debates, but I think just like the lack of character that comes across in the debate. And I thought really there could be a better analysis and an explanation for why the issue is kind of like martyr, who's right, who's wrong, and is kind of like Kyle Rittenhouse, hero or villain. And there's one thing to just analyze the violence, like something came up, God forbid, shit hit the fan and people are killing each other, and this kid emerged as good on the battlefield. I think there's a video of him just a few months ago, getting beat up. I mean, God forbid, maybe hit a girl and then he gets beat up. But in terms of what happened the other night, this kid proved extremely effective on the battlefield. And that's one of those things you can't really predict who's going to emerge a hero on the battlefield till you reach the battlefield. But the battlefield is a definitive spot where there's death and some people are never walking away. And so I thought the science of escalation of violence, very few people could keep a cool head and intelligently discuss the science of escalation of violence, or even the military sciences. And there's a certain, Luke was mentioning this concept of atheism, and the benefit of atheism from a religious perspective, say helping other people, that it's good to be, and I've mentioned this on Week in Review, I think, a few times, and it could be set up even as a Hindu story, but the student asked the guru, what's, you say that all things in the material realm have a positive quality. What's the positive quality of atheism? So the guru answers, helping people, that when you see a person in need, the benefit of atheism is that you shouldn't think God will help them. You should think maybe there is no God, and if I don't help this person, they won't be helped. And also in terms of the military science of violence, the atheistic perspective is usually the best perspective to take. It's saying, what happens if everyone goes crazy and uses their full efforts for the purpose of killing each other? What would happen in that scenario? And that is basically the military science. Just say karma flips, and the karma of how we had been interacting enters a military state, and the current state of karma, God forbid, would reach a level where it's basically kill or be killed. And to think logically in terms of that situation, and to even the pre-planning, that someone like Kyle Rittenhouse on the spot would perform exceptionally well from a military level of violence, and even just make these clean kills, and be on the phone and helping the person he killed, and then calmly walking with his hands up, and there's bullets flying and all these things. And this is the same geeky kid, so to say, that got beat up in school a few weeks ago. So it's interesting also, the kind of the nature of the battlefield, and also kind of like the John Marks Kirk Doolittle talking point, where how far are we away from urban warfare in the West, or anywhere in the city. And what we saw in Kenosha, you're saying Doovid was in Israel, seeing people on the streets with machine guns is a common sight. And someone was like, can you please stand outside of my store with a machine gun in case like people come to loot or mess with my business, would be an understandable thing. That like, yeah, of course there's a guy standing outside of your establishment with a machine gun because like maybe there's going to be a terrorist or something, and there's going to be a need for a guy with a machine gun to be standing there. And when you think of like ISIS and things like that forming, and what Doovid has been talking, Brundle, Ricardo, for years now, of balkanization with kind of like armed bands of people with machine guns and even urban warfare. And if you're taking a universal brotherhood of man, like what's been happening in the Middle East and ISIS in Syria, there's absolutely no reason that, God forbid, that can't happen in major cities across America. And especially like examining Destiny in this and saying like, yeah, looking at these people and the people on YouTube and how they analyze these issues, you'd say like, yeah, it would take a miracle for this not to escalate in like something like ISIS and like John Mark's version of that happening in North America.
So you're saying that Destiny is such a bad debater that civil war is the invariable outcome of him speaking publicly on such contentious issues?
No, he's
that's pretty based.
No, he's an archetype. I mean, Destiny probably has 120, 130 IQ, is a relatively good debater. That's why he's a channel and a base. But from an objective understanding of the issue compared to the guy who is entertaining the public by, supposedly being an expert in the issue, is pretty far standard. Like, no, I mean, this guy, if you're listening to this guy for information about the issues, you're probably, God forbid, in pretty bad shape. And it wouldn't be surprised, like if the type of people that are getting their information from not just Destiny, I'm saying like CNN and Fox News, like I'm saying like, Destiny's just the guy that we're giving an example of because, he's almost within our circles of YouTube participating in these public debates. That's a good thing. I'm encouraging people like Howie and, the people watching us to step up and do what Destiny's doing, despite the critique that we're giving. But I'm just saying from the level of the intellectual debate culture, it's not surprising that people are killing each other in the streets.
Of course not. I mean, how could you resolve those debates? People tend to dig their heels in before they even start. Like, it's a moral argument most of the time. It's like, well, I've already decided my opponent is evil, and therefore, like, you can tell in their tone of voice. Like, I've seen it with people debating you and myself as well. Like, they've already made up their mind when it starts. And so it's just like each time it advances, they double down, and they're just more like, you can avoid violence. I think you can only avoid violence when you can actually conclude the debate in a way that both parties are, both sides or whatever, are happy with the outcome or accept it to some extent. And that's not happening.
I mean, I think the essential nature is that people are selfish and they've decided what they think is a fair share of the material realm that they deserve for whatever they think the service that they're contributing is. And so generally these people will team up and work with anybody, including their enemies, in terms for material payout. So the question for them is an internal calculation: how much material pleasure and benefits can I get away with enjoying with the good karma that has been created? And so he actually, Destiny's probably a relatively high IQ guy who could make relatively complex karmatic calculations to be successful and to like do enough good to get away with the sins. But kind of like Lubavitch look like Tanya and the average person, he's essentially a person that is trapped in the desire of trying to sin and get away with it, which is basically the masses of humanity. Almost everybody is essentially in the trap of what I really want to do is sin and get away with it. And the only reason I'm sinning is because I can't get away with it. And my real desire is not to become a righteous person and not sin, but to figure a way out to sin and get away with it. So like obviously, besides for like obvious sexual perversion of like Destiny and Fausch or something like that, their interpretation of events like Kyle Rittenhouse, where it's like, yeah, there have to be heroes and villains, and there has to be a side in winning over. It's a downplay from the recognition of I want to be righteous. And in order to be righteous, I need to understand what proper behavior is and align myself to the best of my ability with proper behavior. And that proper behavior, kind of like from Stefan Molyneux, is somewhat an objective thing that could be determined through the process of trial and error. And so these questions of extreme, where you're going to be on polar opposites, like Kyle Rittenhouse, hero or villain, guns, good thing or bad thing, because it's a really a sign of the culture war, and you're on one side or the other. And so you see people like Destiny Vouch, or your average person, like really anybody who hasn't came to a spiritual level to understand that death is not the finality, has these crappy interpretations. And that's why I was hoping me and Jennifer could at least give some attempt to give a factual karmatic interpretation of what happened. How is it possible that people are killing each other in the street? What karmatically is happening that these people have the power to kill each other on the street? And what is the implications for a reincarnation of the souls of these people, and also the spiritual force of what I'm going to call the escalation of violence? That there's a physical process of escalation of violence. And people who examine Kyle Rittenhouse, and it's a popular issue, you could look like, oh, who's to blame? Should Kyle, be put in prison or not? Was it self-defense or not? So this was saying, like, the Destiny Vouch can't get past, like, was it self-defense or not? Should he be punished or not? And from the spiritual perspective, that's a minor issue. Saying, like, yes, there has to be a judgment, and and someone was killed, someone being killed, there has to be some sort of tribunal and trial, and the person who killed them has to either be cleared or punished, because death is a something that has karmatic implications, just like we were saying, the Agori. Death is something that has, you have to take care of a dead body. As a religious person, as an Orthodox Jew, if someone informed me that there was a fellow Jew that needed to be buried and no one else could bury him or her, and it was upon me, like Doooovid as an Orthodox Jew would be like, oh man, I got to do this. Like, this is incumbent upon me. And if there's a Jew that needs to be buried and no one else is burying them, I have to do it. There's no excuse for me to say no. And that's part of an Orthodox system where, Vedic or any other system usually has some sort of understanding. But yes, it is incumbent upon you of a fellow human being to honor the dead. And that means, cremation or burial or some process. And then you see, like, the finality, like, Kenosha, it's a big deal. Why? Because someone died. So why karmatically is death such a big deal? And then from a factual level, beyond, say that there's, Doooovid, and there's a Doooovid who desires the material body that I'm in to succeed and do well and have influence on the material realm. But then there's a higher factual reality of the soul, of reincarnations of past lives, and after death, of the likelihood of reincarnation to the next life. So I'm not sure if you have any thoughts. I mean, have you looked into, do you know the facts surrounding the Kyle Rittenhouse case available? Have you seen the videos, or do you have an interpretation about the various spiritual implications of what happened in even the theory of reincarnation? What's the origin of their souls? What's the future of the souls of those people who died?
Well, just to go over the material science part first, thanks for asking. Well, I used to, for those of you that know, I used to work in this field, so I'm familiar with the triage process, right? So I haven't seen that much. I really don't like anything gory, and it's just something I don't want to look at. In terms of what happened, it would take quite a bit of forensic research to figure that out. And I don't know how many different angles of video were captured and so forth. But I know with gunshots, like, because it often overloads the microphone, there's, a lot of challenges with validating exactly what happened. And to know who shot who. Like, I didn't see the reports on anything, and I don't really see myself undertaking that. It's more, I'm interested in the meta-analysis sense that I want to see how people react to it, because it really does tell you quite a bit about how they're seeing things, and it sort of brings to the fore this idea that people sort of make their mind up before they act, and then they retroactively justify it with something that is a socially acceptable virtue signaling justification. It's a rationalization post hoc, which may or may not have anything to do with the original motive. Often doesn't. And I was, listening to what you were saying about this idea of like a murder tango, a cross life murder tango, where it's like you're destined to, kill someone in one life and then get killed by them in the next life. That was kind of what you were saying, right? Sorry, you're muted.
Yeah, I mentioned that from John David Ebert's book, but that idea exists in the Kabbalah and the Vedas, and possibly even from a scientific perspective, that there has to be some sort of karmatic repercussion of murder in the next life, and that karmatic makes sense that there would have to be some sort of karmatic reaction of the souls in the next life of a murder victim and a murder perpetrator, and the most likely one would be an eye for an eye, in that it would be a continual cycle of one person murdering the next, and then the next carnation the opposite happening, and could even be a perpetual cycle that mathematically could be like from some perspective of karma, say yes, this is a predetermined cycle and these souls will kill each other from now till infinity, or it could be a cycle that ends at some point. And that's kind of the multiple truth hypothesis will actually, or if you prefer to call the multiple axiom hypothesis, is much more useful for these hypothetical karmatic analysis than the material science. But as of now, I've largely been introducing the multiple truth hypothesis for practical things. But generally, these issues of reincarnation are actually the precipice behind the need for something like the multiple truth hypothesis. You see how complicated theories of reincarnation could be.
How would I put this? I mean, on some level, I feel like you're looking for a rule of thumb where it's like, this is how it goes generally. And for this type of thing, I don't know that you can really have a generalized rule, because it doesn't mean the same thing for someone. It doesn't always mean the same thing, right? Like, it's ultimately down to intention. But what you could say is that, like, in the greater world, what you do, and like if you manifest your intention into material causality, the probability of that intention remanifesting increases. So you put it out and you put it out and you put it out, and it's like waves on a finite bounded energy field. So the waves can undulate away and vibrate for a long time, but eventually it comes back sort of around the sphere, makes its way back, and that could take a long time or not a long time. It really depends on your own karma, right? So the way we look at it is the sooner your bad intentions bear fruit, and the sooner you can learn from that, the better your karma is. And you'll see this sort of distinction between people with better and worse karma. The better karma people learn from their mistakes, and they're humble enough to say, oh, okay, yeah, that was wrong. I shouldn't have believed Arian Kang's theory because all the evidence is against it, and I'll go forward and sin no more. Whereas a bad karma person just kind of tends to double down, and so it's all boils down to intention. So whatever intention is put out there and keeps remanifesting is just going to continue to amplify and amplify until there's some sort of neutralizing force that comes out of it. And I actually have a pretty interesting meme for that, because I wanted to talk about, well, when I made the meme, which was a while ago, just the sort of dumb idea underpinning this Hegelian dialectic thing, like this fallacy of what I would call linear time, where people believe that everyone is like, civilization is essentially always getting better, and the past is not really that important. It's all about the future because it's always getting better. And the way it's getting better is that there's a thesis, an antithesis, and then a synthesis. And that argument is basically like why society's always progressing, and it's just axiomatically asserted as a good thing. I don't actually have that meme on this computer, so I can't bring it up, but I do have it. So it's basically the Hegelian dialectic is absolutely nonsensical. It's more of a spring. So there's like a natural state of things. And when things are pushed out of their natural state, it's like compressing a spring, putting energy into the spring to compress it from its neutral state. Eventually it bounces back or it breaks, right? And when it bounces back, it boings back and forth. So it tends to overcompensate and then undercompensate and then overcompensate. And then that's where the oscillation happens, not in some like abstract domain of synthesizing ideas that may or may not have any value, right? So in terms of what it means for this particular individual, gosh, it's like I don't really know how to interpret it. It's just sort of one more brick in the wall of, or one more nail in the coffin of, you know, the American dream. And geez, just seeing people either paint this guy as a total hero or a total villain and just run with that is, yeah, it sort of shows like that things are becoming more divided. In terms of the personal karma, it's all really down to at what point you get cognitive dissonance, right? Like the people that died, what influence it bears on their karma will depend on how they react to being killed, because not everybody would react the same way. So if it causes cognitive dissonance, that's where you lose all the information. It's generally not desirable. But if there's no cognitive dissonance, they're just like, yeah, I was expecting to be killed and now I'm dead and I accept it. And if there's that total sort of submission to the inevitable, way less chance of a cognitive dissonance. So I'd have to know those people individually to be able to make that call. But essentially, when you start analysis, you just have those axioms where everything is subject to causality, and what means things to people is ultimately all about tracing out the matrix of what could potentially cause cognitive dissonance and then interpolating from that what it implies about the person's actual motivations. So to basically have or rather high defense against cognitive dissonance stress. Sorry, you're still muted there, Doovid.
Oh, yeah, sorry. From this pure scientific level, you're saying what effect does the type of death that a person fell affect their reincarnation? And you're saying, okay, most people say it's the state of consciousness upon death that is the biggest determinant of the next carnation. And if being killed affects the person's state of consciousness upon death, then that will be the biggest determinant, maybe so much so that the next carnation could only balance that factor by killing the person in the next life that killed them.
Absolutely, yeah. Imagine you got killed and your last thought was like, I vow revenge. And if you have good enough karma, like if the force of your will is high enough, the future will precipitate a situation where you can get that revenge. It's definitely allowable. So like within the sphere of quantum possibility, whether that happens is down to the karma of the avenger and whether it's strong enough to overwhelm all the competing wills. Because essentially,
well, you could even separate. I mean, hence where you really need the multiple truth hypothesis. I wouldn't agree with your assessment that the will may or may not matter. There could be a stronger force of judgment. So, if you take the multiple truth hypothesis, the state of consciousness, there's multiple factors that are going to go into what causes the person's carnation, next carnation, the state of consciousness, and some sort of greater balancing of energy. So there could be a conflict between global karma, that to say one person kills another, and just because the person who was killed forgives the person that killed them in a spiritual, metaphysical level, does not mean that the karmatic effects of killing that person and the punishment for murder does not still have to be karmatically caused upon the person just because the soul of that person forgave them. But in terms of energy balancing of saying that this person who said, my karma will be to extract revenge in the next life for the person who killed me in this life, and to say that not only is that person going to suffer, a similar fate to what they caused me in the next life, that it will be my soul in the vehicle that causes that harm upon the person in the next life, versus saying like, no, I'm going to go back to Godhead, or my next incarnation has absolutely no connection to the soul of the person that killed me. However, from a factual karmatic level, actions have consequences, and the determining factor of the consequence for actions is not just the victim of the offense. There's other karmatic factors that have to be dealt with, and for such, so a grave offense of murder, you can't just get the forgiveness of the murdered party. There has to be some sort of karmatic consequence, and how that works out in reincarnation, or if you have a system to say, maybe there's a repentance and the person committed the gravest of sins, but somehow made up for that and won't get punished for it, or went through some sort of purgatory, or it turned out that say it was a righteous fact. He was saying Kyle Rittenhouse was correct, and he will suffer absolutely no karmatic blemish for his action because it was 100% karmatically justified. And we say like, no, pretty unlikely. And it's probably unlikely that murder, like Vaush was saying, that you can't really have karmatically free murder. There's no such thing. You can have duty where a situation to say my karma at the situation was to defend myself, and I'm sorry that person caused their own death. And when that person attacked me, it triggered the course of action that caused myself to defend myself. And in essence, I did not cause that person's death. That person's actions by attacking me is what caused their death. And from the karmatic angle of the escalation of violence, and also, did the person have to want to die? Did they die because they wanted to die? Was there some sort of karmatic element? And then also the idea of a collective consciousness and martyrdom, where if a person dies in public during a public gathering in an unusual situation, that in Hebrew it's called Yom Hishtalkus, where all of the karma of the person's whole creation from the moment their soul entered the mother's fetus to the moment of death is gathered into that one moment, and that it's not necessary that the soul has to just like reincarnate into some new carnation and that's the end of it, that the soul could somewhat, so to say, dissipate and become a force of a larger collective karma. So God forbid here in these two cases, like George Floyd or any of these cases where like the spirit of George Floyd has acquired, so George Floyd's soul didn't like enter some, reincarnation immediately and isn't now in, the next creation. George Floyd's soul has been dislocated and is representative of a greater force of collective karma. But if you were factually trying to describe, like, what's this force that is causing all this change to occur to society, you would say, yes, it is factually the dislocated soul of George Floyd that didn't reincarnate and is a representative of these mass movements right now, because the soul of George Floyd wasn't successful, so say he didn't die in the way he was supposed to die, and therefore he wasn't able to immediately reincarnate, and the soul dislocated and is the spirit behind this mass movement.
Well, that would be an interesting story, but yeah, I guess reality pans out to be a little bit less exciting than that, perhaps in the long run.
What I'm saying is, it from your understanding of reincarnation is like, no, George Floyd's soul, he died and it had to have been reincarnated, or is it possible that his soul is currently dislocated and hasn't found a proper reincarnation and is actually the force behind these larger international movements? The fact that the energy balance was disturbed by George Floyd's soul not finding an immediate reincarnation.
Well, it would depend on George Floyd's individual spirit power, whether he could disturb, the astral planes on that level. I see no evidence to support that. Now, the media wanting to hold him up as some sort of martyr is a different thing, but I'd say that's more of a forced meme than actually, meaning anything. It's got to be a pretty powerful entity to actually manifest effects past your standard, like die, have cognitive dissonance, reincarnate, cry, repeat.
Well, the power of spirituality, where the names that are affiliated with karma aren't predictable. That there's some media programming, but there's a karmatic effect to what happened. There's a reason why these people who were killed are being held up as martyrs in a larger movement. And it's also the cycle of like a messianic idea in Judaism, that this cycle of war and death has to end with some sort of either cataclysmic event where everybody who had bad karma gets killed off, and there's a certain element of people that factually were able to walk the planet without acquiring bad karma and somehow are going to miraculously survive, like, the Armageddon, or some sort of supernatural event where the karma of the world is changed. And then the theory, like, the rebuilding of the temple, where say eventually the energy has to be balanced, and say these souls, if there's a tendency where, okay, like I was killed in the last life, and now the only way to balance energy is if I kill the person who killed me in the last life, and the cycle by mathematic necessity of the laws of physics must repeat until some sort of supernatural event in the future that Jews were classifying the umbrella belief of Messiah will end the karmatic cycle, where no longer do the souls of people that were killed in the previous lifetime have to balance the energy of the karma by killing that person in the next lifetime, and there could be an end of that cycle through what we're calling Messiah, through some sort of ascientific supernatural event that causes the equations that should have kept on perpetrating into infinitum to stop. Or you could take the approach from like a Judeo-Messianic belief that the equations were actually programmed to stop at a certain time, and that'll be when Messiah, that the cycle of the repeating of the reincarnation has a certain purpose to it. And once these equations have become, so to say, permanently balanced, Messiah will come and the world will be redeemed.
Well, yeah, people are trying to wiggle their way out of reincarnation for millennia. So obviously there's going to be all sorts of roundabout ways.
There's a pre-programmed event from the creator of everything that created reincarnation, but also created an eventual end to reincarnation for a purpose, that there was a purpose to creation having reincarnation, but there's some future event that will happen where reincarnation will no longer serve the purpose that it served and will no longer be used.
That sounds
and obviously if there's no more
crazy.
Death. Well, I mean, it's obviously the conclusion of the prophecies. If there's no more cycle of birth and death, there's no more death and rebirth, there's no more need for reincarnation. So the concept of eternal life, so there'll be a Messiah and then there'll be righteous or something like that. And if it's eternal or whatever happens, but if the cycle of birth and death has been disrupted, then obviously the cycle of reincarnation doesn't need to go on any longer, because the reincarnation is specifically an aspect of the cycle of birth and death. And if there is still a material realm with no cycle of birth and death, it would make sense that you wouldn't have reincarnation.
Yeah, I mean, you can extrapolate to the end of the physical universe and say, well, the Earth isn't always going to be habitable because the sun's eventually going to explode. And so where are all the reincarnated souls going to go at that point? And then you could say, well, maybe they'll just sort of assimilate into one glorious whole and float around the universe till they find another planet that their consciousness is able to colonize. And you could even argue that that's a founding myth for life on planet Earth. You could say, well, it actually came from somewhere else that died, and then it moved here as one big thing. And we're just reliving out the same basic tropes that we did in the last planet that we lived on. And once this planet's gone, we'll just pick up our bags and carry on, sally forth to the next planet that has a sufficient amount of earthbound or planet-bound water to start the cycle all over again.
So what about the spiritual concept of, God forbid, the power to take someone else's life? Does that have to be preordained from the time the soul entered, or is that something within someone's free will volition where any person can just decide or make the decisions or will to take the life of another? Or is that some sort of special karmatic privilege that requires, so to say, the approval of higher forces that is probably even preordained from the time of birth? So I mean, from a spiritual level, it can't be that, there was a situation in Kyle Rittenhouse, killed 2 people. Maybe it was self-defense, maybe it wasn't, but it was an escalation of something that happened in the scenario, that the finality of death requires the sanctioning of higher forces, and possibly those higher forces even have to be preordained before birth.
Well, I would say, like, in the tautological way, sure. I mean, everything is predestined in the quantum sense, but in the spiritual way, because animals kill, I wouldn't say that there's anything uniquely spiritual about the ability to carry out killing someone else. Like, it has to be something that you can isolate it as a uniquely human behavior. One thing that has been done, though, is ritualism surrounding these types of killings, like animals, going along with a certain sacrifice that sort of honors the animal's contribution and so forth, ritualism. So there's some of that. And one could argue that it is the safe bet because, these entities do exist and they can affect the material realm. And so it makes sense to serve them and please them in order that they will, shift the astral planes in your favor.
Yeah, I mean, if Jennifer has a system that she's promoting, and so say, so her system, the Church of Entropy system, as opposed to Doooovid and the multiple truth, axiom hypothesis, is more a framework to understand competing systems and try to understand the ultimate truth better, recognizing that the ultimate truth probably contains multiple competitive systems, and then to look at the axioms. So if Jennifer has a system, and her system means that she has axioms, and because her system has axioms, that means that the axioms that she has precludes other axioms that she could have had. Because she has these axioms, that means that she can't have other axioms. And then the multiple truth hypothesis could analyze, will say, okay, Jennifer might have a working system, but what if can someone make a system that has different axioms than hers and chose on this point where she has this as an axiom, where someone could have chose actually there's another option there that could have been a competing axiom?
Oh yeah, I mean there might be, but I think it's good to bring evidence before making the assertion. There's a couple of questions, namely John Wolfe, who are reincarnated aborted fetuses mad at? I think it's people who committed suicide in their past life. So why do people commit suicide? Because they want to die. Oh, but it's not possible to die. Okay, so you come back, but you still want to die. Oh, guess what? Abortion. So it's going to be a series of successive abortions until the person loses the will to die. Then they'll come back and live as usual. And essentially, it's just like indicative of a general trend towards indifference towards suffering. And you could see how people sort of give themselves permission to do things like that and justify it in various ways. But it does cause suffering to end the life past the 5-week point, because that's when you have a heartbeat, and that's when the quantum field has come up. So someone had also asked, Bacon's like thinking the womb is the fulcrum of special kind of Wu-based metascientific gauge symmetry. It's nothing that complicated, dear. What you're talking about is you can think of it like a circuit, but it's actually a cycle. So everything is cycles the way I look at it. And the womb is the place where a certain part of the cycle happens, right? Like that first reuptake where the quantum consciousness reduces to the fetus. That's a very unusual thing, right? Because usually it's localized to the body. That's why we often have people who think that their consciousness is equal to their body. So that first pump, like you want to think of it as a cycle of consciousness that functions essentially as a pump where energy is going into the body from the mind and into the mind from the body, but not along the same channels. So the mind tells the body how to evolve, and the body basically simulates the mind. and so that they can affect each other, but it's on different time scales that happens. So thanks for the questions. I'm sorry to go so far into the theory there. I think it's useful because to me it sort of paints a picture that satisfies my curiosity. And I know if I want to know more, I have to start looking at biology and stuff like that. The time portal of the womb. Well, if people are interested, I think that there's some stuff that goes into this, although I don't know about the accuracy of these teachings, but Valhalla being some type of metaphor for the nascent space. It's also known as the bardo in the Tibetan dream yoga tradition. The bardo is basically where your soul goes between the time of dying in one body and I don't want to say reincarnating, because maybe reincarnating is the whole process, but that moment of, I suppose you could say transmogrification. You're in the bardo in that intermittent time. Thank you for listening to the rant. Looks like we got Deborias in the chat. There's actually a couple people coming over from Luke's, Doovid, so maybe you spoke too soon and your appearances on Luke were increasing the audience. Oh yeah, why don't we segue into that actually? How did that go? You weren't on for very long. I was sad because I only ever listen to Luke when you're on, and that one just went it went by like a summer breeze.
Yeah, that's why I was saying, like, Luke is easygoing but hard to work with. So I'm having a hard time kind of like planning and even discussing like, what we're trying to accomplish streaming. So just kind of like, come on, we'll talk, and then like we're on, and it's him doing it how he wants to do it, and just kind of like, it's my stream, you want to be on, it's the way, it's under my conditions, and it may be somewhat common. I'm not going to critique Luke and tell him how to stream on his own channel. Like obviously he can do what he wants, but it makes it hard to work together, and then it's kind of like you want to have like topical discussions on various things, or just I'm on, and then like I'm giving him like stuff to talk about, and then and I'm actually giving him like clips and information, but still like he's playing like Fox News clips in the background, nothing related to what I'm talking about. So I mean, it is what it is. Luke wants to try to create a viewership for people that are interested in what he wants to offer, and I'm trying to maybe move away from that, because like I'm not really sure. I'm just saying Luke's a grown man. He doesn't need Doovid's help in how to be a good streamer. But in terms of like Doovid's value proposition, if he's going to seriously talk about topics I want to talk about, it's interesting. But if he's not going to seriously talk about these topics that are, I'm going to be as a subject matter or something, like the whole thing doesn't really make that much sense. So, you could come on just like, how's it doing? What are you up to? And even Week in Review is the question, is Luke really listening to what I'm talking about? And I was mentioning Luke about, Week in Review, and I said like Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram, and I don't even know if Luke is familiar with those people, and he didn't seem that much interested. So I think Luke has kind of like fallen out of his streaming game, and I've seen how streaming has moved, and it's kind of like leaving behind what Luke was doing. And that's why I mentioned to you this guy Devin Nash in the Gamers Analytics, where he's got a page and mostly dealing with Twitch and advising gamers on how to make the most money and maximize their audience, which is maybe JF tried a little bit, but like fact is there's a lot more money in viewership in gaming. Gaming is by far the single most popular thing that is done in live streaming. I think like maybe even over like 80% of live streaming is related to gaming. So, but Brundle, we used to have these open conversations. So as I said last week, the only way I think Doovid and Luke could be successful streaming and working together is if somehow we could openly have these conversations about what makes for good streaming. And I'm not exactly sure if Luke is just kind of like, trust me, go with it. And, at the end of the day, just like, well, how long are you going to trust Luke and just go with it with, like his idea of how he wants to do his show. And obviously it's his show, like he's not forcing me to come on his show. But this week I was on less, and when I was on, we ended quickly, and that's also related to his viewership. You know, like obviously Republican, God forbid, the violence in the street in the Republican National Convention, I think gave Luke higher viewership. And I think when Luke had higher viewership, he didn't even send me the link. So actually, like Monday through Thursday, Luke didn't even invite me. And I think that's largely just viewership. Like he had over 50 viewers and probably was like he just wanted to talk and do what he wanted to talk about. And he didn't really like want to bring me on to talk about Judaism. And I even appeared on the chat. You know, I was mentioning to Luke, like, I wonder how many people watching Luke have requested him more analysis of, Mark Shapiro, his, Judeo scholar that he likes analyzing, and basically zero, none of his audience is requesting more Mark Shapiro analysis. So like Luke has to figure that, and the concept, me and Jennifer, just where we're talking about our ideas and where we're holding and the advancing of ideas and who we're talking to. I don't know why Luke is incapable of doing that. I think it would benefit him in his streaming and his audience, but he doesn't.
Too much cognitive dissonance, God forbid. I mean, you can just profile how he dealt with the whole K-Mac versus Kaufman's critique thing. Like he just sort of
bad karma. You're saying like Luke can't do it because he created.
You can deal with
talking
to people who disagree with you and resent whatever about you, and maybe he just can't do that. I don't. Maybe it's just not in him. Like I think on some level he really does kind of need to feel like admired and loved. Whereas you're just like, fuck it, I'll get into the mud if I need to, and I'm going to do it for an idealistic reason, and that's why I feel your vibe, because I'm coming from essentially the same place, right? Whereas with Luke, it's a bit trepidatious and cautious, and it really does matter to him to be seen a certain way. And ironically, he's not going to be seen that way until he actually embraces the cognitive dissonance, right? It's like, no, you don't have to take a position. You can just accept that both of these people made contributions and acknowledge the complexity of the question, right? Rather than saying, well, yeah, it's a solved, like it's open and shut, right? And he's done that also with like his theory of information zombies. He's like, people are not just information zombies. They make rational decisions based on information. I'm like, what universe are you living in? I mean, you believe this anti-information zombie theory because you read it somewhere, which is like him believing that is sort of proof that it's wrong. Or it's right, sorry. Because he just accepted the theory without even questioning it. Oh, the irony.
Yeah, I mean, it's basic extroversion, like you said, Gandalf, people who largely enjoy hearing their own voice, people who enjoy telling the same stories again and again, people who enjoy clarifying their beliefs again and again. So Luke largely uses me as a venue to say, like, okay, now Doooovid gets to speak, but really what he wants to do is create the platform for himself to tell his stories and his thoughts on these various topics. And
does it ever feel like he's using you as a token Jew to up his street cred?
I'm not sure, because like I'm not sure how much that would help. I think Luke actually wants a venue to talk about and tell stories about his Jewish experience. And if you say like the token Jew, but like yeah, he needs like a fellow Jew to discuss things as Jews and tell his stories, and the certain type stories or insights he needs like the backup of a Jew telling a fellow Jew, and his normal audience of what he does isn't the same of kind of like this Luke who's telling stories about his Jewish experience that necessitates like a fellow Orthodox Jewish co-host in order to tell these stories, because otherwise they would come out differently.
Awesome. Yeah, so there's a question from Aiken Drum. He wants to know if souls suffer from the effects of gravity. Well, you got to answer what souls are made of, and that's light. And light does bend under gravity. And mainly light's behavior is dictated by electromagnetics. So you got to think of consciousness like a super complicated magnetic configuration. And the reason it's a super complicated magnetic configuration is that it as in unison projects the consciousness. So it's this big machine that a bunch of lights at the same time, sort of going in one direction, making this field. So yeah, you're gonna be bound to the Earth gravity, but there's also a certain anti-gravity effect because light is not as affected by gravity as mass is. So yes, but like ultimately bound, but not in the same way that mass is.
Yeah, so the Tanya, the Lubavitch book, would basically say, you're right. However, Jews have a soul that has a source of power that is outside of any force in the material realm. That you say, like, light, in fact, no, is not the source of the soul. There's a spiritual force beyond the power, even the power of light, that like, in theory, at least, the Jewish soul or souls in general could be sourced from, and there's not just the Judeo different type souls for different people. There's various Vedic or systems also that would necessitate disagreeing with what Jennifer is saying. Is like, no, light is not the source of the soul. The soul comes from something that is completely independent of everything that we experience in the material realm.
Oh yeah, I mean it's a religion. I mean that's what religion does, right? It wants to impose certain things on the metaphysical realm, right?
Well, I mean, it's the Vedas, it's the scripture, it's the sages. So this, the scriptures itself say that, and it comes to say that the truth of the matter is something beyond what could be figured out from the material realm, and that's revealed in the scripture. And the scripture informs people that be informed that there are powers outside of the ability of the understanding of things constricted in the material realm, and that usually includes the soul.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the soul is like one of the more mysterious things. So just for the people asking in the chat, so as to get an idea of where I'm coming from, like essentially I'm saying consciousness is made up of light, but it's a certain type of light in that it's entangled with itself. It's not just an isolated field, it's an entangled spherical field. And I've got it here trying to display it, but it's only displaying part of it. But basically it shows you how a large spherical entity folds into the physical body, and it needs to do that because it has a lot of energy in the conscious field, so it needs to distribute itself so that there's no electrical discharge. And basically the personality would be some subset of this overall shape. And so one person has this configuration, everybody else has a configuration. These configurations can become mildly entangled with each other, but largely can't, because our survival strategy as humans is subjectivized consciousness, i.e. localized to the brain. So that is basically how it would answer that. Yeah, I've just got I just wanted to pull the diagram up real quick so people could have a look at it. Here it is. So I don't know if this makes sense, but if we use this to solve biology, we'll be able to get way more accurate approximations because it actually takes your folding into account. So notice how there's all this stuff about folding and geometry, and this will basically, if we just want to see a comparison, and I know I've brought this article up before, but it's a comparison with where other people who are looking at these problems are at, and they're really struggling because they haven't really thought about consciousness. I mean, it's usually a bit of an afterthought for most people, or soul, spirit, whatever, So here's the, I don't know if you remember this one, Doovid, this image that I was talking about with the 3 little spirals that emerged. Their description is fairly primitive. Like they're just saying, oh, we can see it's a vibration and it's spiraling. They're not really saying, well, this is our model and this is how it predicts it. So I would like to see an actual geometric argument that predicts this at some stage. And they're really just getting to the point where they're basically forced to accept that the motive for life is quantum mechanical in nature. And even at that, like, people are still not really necessarily 100% sold. I guess they've been turned off of quantum ideology for one reason or another. Are you there, Doovid? Hello.
Yeah, I'm muting myself because I'm actually
Oh, if you're eating, I can answer a couple questions.
No, I'm
in
not
the,
eating.
in
I'm,
the
I'm
chat.
actually grinding some trees. I'm about to roll. And I have my yard clipper that I use to cut the bud into pieces, but I'm not going to show that on the screen for possible YouTube. There might be minors watching or people in areas where this isn't perfectly legal. But that's why I was muting myself so you wouldn't hear like this.
The chomping.
My
Wow, he's the guy to go to if you want to get the job done right. I mean, those stickiest of the ickies don't stand a chance against those clipperinos.
Yeah, I mean, you just got to whip out the garden tools here. So I had a bunch of stuff over the last few weeks of stuff that I sent you that we didn't talk about last week because how we, basically decided to become co-host last week and didn't give us the opportunity to cover some of the stuff we would have. So I don't know if you want to let me do a screen share just to cover a bunch of quick things.
Sure, I'll get that loaded up right away.
Okay, so I saw Charles Moskowitz had a few weeks ago. I haven't spoke with him. Brundle said I should reach out and stream with him. I haven't been streaming much, but he's active. And he had this guy, Narvish Ashvidi, talking about the Jews of India. And he's a scholar of Judaic studies in India, from a Muslim family. And it was interesting. And he has a whole bunch of articles that, you look at academia, like the Jews of Bollywood. It's interesting. Like Bollywood was largely started by Jews, but it happened when the films were silent, and once the films weren't silent anymore, because so few Jews could learn the languages that the films needed to be in, that largely led to the decline of only a handful of Jews who were capable of learning the films after the silent era. But he has a whole bunch of articles, including articles on like the English and Freemasonry and how the Jews were used as a wedge to help the English colonialize, and a whole bunch of interesting cultural dynamics about the popularity of Hitler in India, and the rise of various Holocaust denial. So some interesting papers, and encourage people to check out Charles Moskowitz if that type stuff is interesting. I might reach out to speak to this man. I'm not sure, Jennifer, if you thought it was interesting to talk about any of this stuff. Like I'd mentioned, the role of British in Freemasonry and divide and conquer that the Jews played in British colonialization. That this man had actually written an academic paper on that, specifically related to Freemasonry and Jews and British colonial rule, and just the history or attitude of Jews in India in general.
If you want to do a screen share, you're already full screen, so I'll adjust it.
I forgot to share my screen. I apologize. Yeah, I meant to. I thought I was share. I forgot to share my screen. Sorry. Klutzy Doooovid, Boomer Tech. Okay, so I'm just all these in the Facebook message from last week. So here is the Charles Moskowitz interview with this man, Afridi, of Judaic studies. And he also has literature about the creation of Judaic studies in India, and also like in China, to think that, there are not that many Jews in India, but there's enough demand that there's Indians who become experts on Judaism and then teach in university. Here was something interesting from the World Science Festival, which is basically the physicist Green, Jew, who has a lot of these Jewish physicists like Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram that we're maybe going to analyze their kind of like blood sports debate with each other. But World Science Festival is pretty interesting, and this one was about On the Shoulders of Giants, and kind of about how Newtonian, or the ideas of physics, built up over time. So that was something I thought maybe would be worth discussing last week, but didn't come up. But interesting video. Jennifer probably knows most about that. JF is a review of the force behind existence towards a new biology. That was interesting. That was from last week. Pew Trends on dating and relationships, about people saying it's harder and harder to meet people and find relationships. That was last week. Jennifer had a ski video. The Howard Hughes Medical Institute. When we talk COVID-19 updates, there's more stuff. There's a lot of information, but they had like a whole update on the most recent biological scientific discoveries related to COVID. So any of this audience here that's following, me and Jennifer now done 5 in-depth videos on the science of COVID-19. So here is the Howard Hughes Medical Institute with some of the leading experts around the world with the most recent understandings of this science and mechanisms of COVID. This information, videos of this Narvas John Afridi about the popularity of Hitler in India was also interesting. There's academic articles. I saw a random thing. I mentioned this to Jennifer. We could talk about it more, but that one's too big for the. I think it's too big for the chat. But Lab Roots, who has a whole bunch of videos also, and kind of like COVID-19 at this point, I'm getting better information. So Lab Roots has a YouTube page, and the experts talking about COVID-19 from like a commercial company that makes medical devices is actually probably better information than you're getting from the government and the universities at this point. But this was not related to COVID-19, but this Lab Roots company that puts together these videos and explanations was obeying orders reduces empathy-related brain activity. In the something that I forget the name offhand of the famous psychological study in California of the Jewish Holocaust survivor, God forbid, who showed that people, like the prison experiment and then shocking the other people. But now there's more neurological evidence. I think they even repeated those studies studying brain waves, but there's more studies on obeying orders reducing empathy-related brain activity. That could also relate to like the karma of Kyle Rittenhouse in saying, well, if you're obeying orders, if you're part of some group karma, it might make it easier to reduce dissonance.
Yeah, very interesting. It reminds me of something I saw this week about virtue signaling, going into a big study of why people try to show their goodness. Maybe I'll talk about that when you're done sharing your ideas there.
Yeah,
I can also play some of those Sheldon Solomon clips if you're interested in taking a break. I'm not sure if you still have energy or what.
Let me catch up on all the stuff that I didn't talk about last week. I think I did, and then some of this stuff for this week, and then so Lex Friedman, I've been watching that. Jennifer has some clips, and I saw this clip recently. It showed that he talked about his daily routine, and actually he mentions like chanting mantras in the morning. Here was a video I found. Jennifer, that analyzes kind of AI and the collapse of the airline industry and how the airline pricing model had largely been given over to AI, and how COVID-19 has destroyed the pricing model that almost all airlines have been using. This one, hopefully, I don't know if maybe even play some clips from this. It might even be better than Lex Friedman. But there was a great debate between Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram. It even got like kind of testy, where it was almost like blood sports. And I was calling it the battle of the geeky Jewish, the math geek Jewish millionaires. And all of those are important because like Eric Weinstein, Stephen Wolfram.
Might be a good idea to not display your private messages on the show if you don't mind. That's all showing up. Not just my PMs, but everyone. So your whole Facebook is like screen shared. Maybe is it possible to take it off that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was trying to do the easiest way to get through all the ways, and basically, I just messaged the stuff to Jennifer on Facebook. But yeah, privacy is an important thing. and appreciate your concerns about people's names, information, and privacy. So we don't have to go through all of it, but yeah, that debate between Stephen Wolfram and Eric Weinstein had some good clips, and was a lot to it. I think that the nature of them also kind of being millionaires, and mentioned Brother Nathaniel spoke with Adam Green. There was a discussion on the Late Show with Namarasa from the Hare Krishna movement, of him and his brother-in-law, about the Hinduization of ISKCON. So it was a pretty interesting topic. I put the link in the chat. And let me just finish with these things. So there's more COVID interesting things watching this video, and like the history of hand washing and more physics. There was a New York Times deep analysis on Donald Trump Jr., and it was interesting, relate to Jennifer, that it referred to Don Jr. as like a meme warrior. Don Jr. is a meme general in the meme wars, and he is commanding the D-Day invasion. And kind of says how like Don Jr. was this wandering person who couldn't find meaning in his life and helping his dad in politics, and he found a real special niche in like creating these eBay memes. And he's got like a Jewish partner in crime that is helping him with this stuff. I asked Jennifer to take a look at some of this stuff. I put in the chat this guy Devin Nash that I mentioned already, and he's got these interesting videos. I'm not sure if Jennifer, if you could screen share something, but he talks about like Fortnite being banned, and most of it is related to gaming and the analytics. And he has these videos where he goes over basically showing you exactly how much money the top gamers make and how they make their money, and the various decisions that these top gamers make, and how that affects the bottom line of how much money they make. So I like those videos, Devin Nash, that were just like very straightforward in streaming. What gets you a bigger audience? How does that affect the bottom line? And so like what me and Jennifer are doing now, we're not going to make large money. I mean, we could make money, like you get a channel monetized and get people watching the videos or super chats, but like relatively, like me and Jennifer are smart enough that we're going to find a lot better ways than streaming to make money. But if you're a gamer and have millions of people watching you, you could make millions of dollars, but you really need millions of views to make millions of dollars, and it's near impossible. Even like Stephen Molyneux, the biggest people, Sargon in the game, Sam, maybe Jordan Peterson made millions of dollars, but the sheer number of gamers making millions of dollars is enormous. There's probably hundreds of gamers making millions, some of them, tens of multiple millions of dollars, and possibly even like Sam Harris. I mean, Joe Rogan's obviously a multimillionaire, but so that venue doesn't really apply for what me and Jennifer are doing. But at least the analytic of looking at the number and analyzing the numbers, and kind of the karmatic understanding of putting the effect of what the people are doing into a dollar amount, I thought was a useful exercise. So anybody who, maybe JF kind of has an approach. I wouldn't be surprised if JF would appreciate Devin Nash and his work and say like that's some good analysis.
Yeah, I watched a bit of the video. I couldn't really get into it. It seemed very technically specific, but were there any aspects in particular you wanted to go over? I do have a clip of the Weinstein Wolfram conversation that I can play at some point as well.
Yeah, those are good. So okay, so I guess because we started early, Doovid covered all the various things that I wanted to cover. So it's now 9. Some weeks we just start the show at this time. So yes, I mean technically, like we had a good show, we could call it a week. But like obviously, if Jennifer's up for more in-depth, deeper discussion, definitely what's going on with Eric Weinstein and Stephen Wolfram is very interesting in streaming. And I was thinking like me and Jennifer in the direction of streaming probably are more moving in the direction of, I would say, like Eric Weinstein and still Stephen Wolfram than Luke Ford. So I thought it's interesting. And then also like even the debates where like modern day debate, Destiny, JF, that I would like to follow. Like, JF, Brundle and Luke Ford hadn't even heard of modern day debate, and say, okay, Warski doesn't exist, JF and the blood sports don't really exist, but modern day debate exists and is pretty successful, and I'm encouraging people to get involved. And I don't think Luke Ford cares, and he's not really going to want to groom people and get them involved in order to do debates on modern day debate. But I think me and Jennifer are probably moving in that direction. So, certainly if Jennifer wants to go into the streaming dynamics or covering, these larger debates, and I had a few ideas like we could do possibly on Week in Review. We had done like PowerPoints and music. We could add a segment of profiles of streamers or debaters or something like that in order to analyze some of these personalities that are emerging to represent these greater ideas. And probably the bigger names that we could start with related to stuff we're talking about is probably Stephen Wolfram and Eric Weinstein. But certainly if Jennifer has any names or recommendation, and also a way to get other people involved where people should feel comfortable that like, yes, I did some research and I came on Week in Review and presented my research. And that could even just be a profile personality of a streamer, with some highlight clips, or just like what's their background, what are the topics they talk about, what type of spheres of people do they talk with.
Yeah, that would be fun. Definitely, if we could find some people, that would be great. So I think Howie wanted to come on. I don't know if you want to take like a 10-minute break and come back for a bit, or if you're in the mood to have a bit of a chat with him for a little while longer. I'm not sure.
I keep on running my mouth, so I have like my stuff here that I need to roll. So I probably have to be here like 5-10 minutes of sitting here. So if you want to talk, you could play a clip, or Howie could come on, or if you want to kind of like talk or explain something where it's mostly me listening, that's fine. Also, that now is a good time for you to give your thoughts on something if it's mostly me listening.
Are you okay with me sending Howie the link, or do you want to wait for a bit?
That's fine. So as I said, like I covered last week, I felt like I didn't mind Howie coming on, and I think Howie has potential to advance as a streamer. He already is a streamer, but I felt he kind of like hijacked the Week in Review, because like once he came on, like then he stayed on till the end of the show, and it was too difficult for me to mention some of these ideas that I want to mention, or for me and Jennifer to advance these ideas. So at this point, I'll leave it to Jennifer, so if she wants to just discuss things with me and you, and try to advance some of these ideas, or in depth, or if you just want to have guests on, and that's fine. Also, you could have Howie or whoever Libra wants to show up and just continue, as long as that's interesting. Although I do think it's unlikely that if Howie comes on, that it's possible that like he's going to leave and then we're going to go back to talking about these topics. But up to you. So I'll leave that in your discretion.
Well, it looks like he doesn't want to come on. I guess he's doesn't want to take another Aryan Kang's beating. So yeah, if anyone's interested in that kind of debate, there was one with me and some guy on Claire Cause last show, I think. So it was not particularly interesting, and yeah, it would be nice to get off the subject, but people just cannot seem to stop LARPing and causing like these enormously offensive divisions.
That's why you need the debate circuit. So say like, like, do you formally want to step in the arena and debate it? And there's a venue, and saying like, okay, prepare to enter the arena and be crushed. You saw what happened to the last person. Otherwise, like, stop wasting the time, get with the program, stop LARPing, stop wasting everybody's time. Either step in the arena or fall in line. And so hopefully Jennifer, as she's building up her own channel, and Week in Review in general, but that's why it's important to create these debating circuits where say like, no, it's not, nothing's wrong with Howie coming in and having his biases on his view of what truth is, and willing to debate and defend his ideas. But there has to be like objective standard, like a game of chess. You're going to play, and there's going to be a winner and a loser. So like at some point, like, these are your ideas, and you have to do the proper preparation to step into the arena and defend your ideas. Otherwise, stop wasting people's time.
Yeah. Well, it's significantly more difficult to, take part in a debate than actually just watch one or have ideas that you think for whatever reason are substantiated, because most people have the ideas that they have largely, traditions, but also because they haven't been exposed to other ideas. So you probably want to be at least somewhat familiar with your opponent's position before you go into a debate that you can't possibly win. So looks like Howie has learned the lesson on that. So that's good. And Super Librix, I don't think we'll be hearing much from him anymore. He's sort of gone in the Claire Caw mode of like harassing me on Facebook to try to kind of chide me into supporting his vision. And I don't know, you dumped him, I think, eh? After, like, you didn't really, I think he added you to his group at some point, didn't he?
Yeah, I think I'm still friends with him on Facebook. Yeah, I don't even know. Usually I'm not friends with people without their real identity on Facebook, so I'm not sure if I'll maintain the friendship. I wish him the best. He had some interesting ideas, but like, yeah, he doesn't look like he's looking for partners to cooperate or intellectual friends. He looks like, he's looking for followers or financial supporters, and so probably it's just going to be a bad venue where he's just coming to Week in Review to try to recruit new followers or ask for money for his causes. That's probably not going to be a long-term fit, or even a short.
He wants other people to do the work for him, and he seems to think he's going to come in and be in charge of everything, and it's perplexing because
he's not even Jewish. I mean, what does the guy think he is? He's not even Jewish. He's not even Jewish, and he thinks he's going to come in and be put straight into management. I'm saying, like, at least, like, like something, like some reason the person might, and even that you're saying, like how egregious is this dude? Like, he thinks he's Jewish, he's going to be put straight into management, but it's saying like Super Libra doesn't even have that, and he's just like, like, I demand to be put straight into management.
It's funny because it's like anybody who had any clue about the culture would know that kind of approach just. I mean, you could kind of profile it at some point, like, why did Kraut lose and JF win? That type of thing. Like, what was the difference? The whole scientists please respond. Like, there's just no way to come back from certain blunders. And yeah, I guess I have a hard time politely blowing somebody off. I guess I either become mean or I'm too, like, he's like, oh, you changed. I'm like, I don't really think I changed. I never had any tolerance for your dumb idea in the first place, but I was just trying to be, whatever.
Patient and nice and give a person a chance and judge someone positively. So he's like, yeah, I judge you positively. I gave you a chance. I still wish you the best. I'm your ever well-wisher. However, I'm not seeing the association produce productive results, so I'm moving on.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, no matter how good your idea is it realistic to come in and expect people to take up your cause? Like, it makes me curious, like, what really motivates that mentality? Because it's almost like a profile, like Claire does.
Especially when it's completely incomprehensible. Like, if it's Claire or Libra or, with Gandalf, it was like blatantly a LARP and like not meant to be taken funny. But it's something like, no one understands what your cause is. No one's going to join it. But like, yet here you are, continually begging people to take up your cause, even though like everyone has basically told you, like, no, like, I don't, like, secular criminism is not interesting to me. It doesn't matter how many times you're going to ask me. And, so it really is Claire Tier, where it's the archetype of this, aggressive preacher type thing that is making, God forbid, I don't think ill. It doesn't have to be pejorative, but like their attempts at human association are largely going to be in the realm of negative karma, where you're thinking like, oh man, is this continued association going to bring bad karma to the people affiliated with it? because there's no positive results. Saying like, okay, I got involved in this person's movement, and good things that happened to me in terms of financial success, like things that you could measure it by. Like I have more friends, I have more followers, I'm getting along better with people, I'm making more money. Like metrics, successful, I'm reading more books. Any of these things that you could successfully give a metric to say, okay, like this person's association or cult or technique is actually improving my life. And so it's just this constant sales pitch of like, follow me, become my follower, and everything will be magically better, when there's absolutely no evidence supporting that claim. And then the claim just gets made again and again and again, and there's no attempt to logical, like, what about the evidence? And just gets to a repetition of the claim.
I know, and it's the same with the Aryan invasion theory. It's like, well, isn't it obvious that white giants, came from space and colonized the planet? I'm like, no, it's not obvious that the planet was seeded by alien life and that
No,
they
but
have
you
white skin.
strawman that. I mean, to say that no, Aryan invasion theory is largely the accepted theory and understanding in university and intellectual culture, and there's a reason for it. So it's not the same thing as like Libra's tier secular chronism. So I mean, as a pejorative, using I hate Aryan invasion theory, and to me, Aryan invasion theory is just as stupid as secular chronism. But like, no one ever heard of secular chronism. No one is really ever going to care about it. As opposed to Aryan invasion theory is the textbook, largely accepted theory of human history taught in most universities all around the world.
Yeah, I'm going against mainstream science.
I mean, we're not talking about Howie and his like magical Atlantis stuff. We're talking about the evolutionary, or like Max Mueller type thing, like Howie and his Atlantis is like Norvin tier stuff. Like they're not teaching that in universities. They have some like JF evolutionary type thing, but in saying that reality is Howie wasn't even going to argue in favor of the classical Aryan invasion theory. Howie was going to argue more in favor of some like mythical Norvin, like Atlantis tier stuff.
Yeah, I'm reminded.
I mean, you make
Luke
light
said.
of it by not recognizing. I mean, because you have your bias to be like, ho, Aryan invasion theory is just as stupid as the Norvin tier Atlantis stuff, but without like saying like, no, if actually Aryan invasion theory is what they teach at Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and every other reputable institute in the West.
Yep.
And there's a karmatic reason for that.
Yep.
And it's not, it's not because of like Howie's tiered logic. Like Howie is probably never even going to read the books or understand the reason for, what we're going to call the accepted Aryan invasion theory. And to me, that's like evolution. There's a reason why everyone believes in this false theory of evolution, and it's not the same reason why people believe in Santa Claus, although there might be similar reasons. But like, no, I mean, it's a different reason why people believe in just like ridiculous fantasy stuff, because they don't have a foundation of science and knowledge to where the people who are respected in the world the most to have the best understanding of science and knowledge propose these theories that are obviously false.
Yeah, I'm reminded of what Luke said when I forget exactly how he worded it, but it was something to the effect of you're going to be running into trouble if you don't gauge your social standing accurately enough. I know I'm not actually repeating it verbatim here, but do you remember when he sort of said
it's
that?
a stay in your lane type thing where it's like, yeah, you have to know your place and your role and your social standing, and you call it like category errors. But if you're looking at a place where there's a difference when a Harvard PhD in Eastern Studies talks about the Aryan invasion theory, and then when Norvin and Howie talk about it, even if they're both equally wrong.
Yeah, that's a point. I guess I'm just kind of seeing one as a harmonic of the other.
I mean, Doooovid is telling you that Howie's version of white giants and mythical figures is in fact probably more likely than evolution. But there's a reason why no one's teaching, Howie's ideas outside of like a mythological class about like ancient Greek or Norse theology or something like that. But but the greatest minds are all teaching this like Max Mueller Aryan invasion theory till today against evidence and scholarship proving it wrong, just like evolution and coronavirus. So to say that at some point, are you going to look at the experts and say, why are they wrong? And look at the elections and say, like, is it likely that coronavirus could have been a bioweapon and it's got something to do with China? Or are the Democrats right that, like, no, it's part of evolution. Evolution explains everything. And it's just that Trump is incompetent. And if Trump wasn't incompetent, we would have beat the coronavirus just like China. And like, you can't even consider the possibility that maybe the reason why we're suffering and India is suffering so badly from coronavirus is because it was designed as a weapon. And, that's outside of the Overton window.
Oh, well, yeah, maybe.
Of science. That's in theory, just like so to say, that's outside of the Overton window of science at the moment. That not just say, like, as a conspiracy theory, as a scientist, I'm telling you, I think it's a bioweapon. You're saying, so that's outside of the Overton window, and you would be censored, you would lose your job, like you wouldn't be able to be published, like the current state of science, that's scientific heresy.
Oh, didn't somebody out of Israel claim it was a bioweapon really early on in the game? Seem to have a
ton of people did.
But you're saying it's outside the Overton window. I'm just curious, like, how do you make that distinction?
Well, I mean, saying that now, I mean, yeah, of course, in the beginning, almost everyone was saying it was probably a bioweapon because it's a natural thought. Saying evolution is a good explanation, but bioweapons are a pretty good explanation too. And if you're just going to listen to the experts, like, no, like it happens all the time. Like, haven't you heard of evolution? Like, of course, there's zoonotic viruses and they evolve in animals and then they jump to humans connected to environmental damage. Like it's not even conceivable it was a bioweapon. Like, it's just because you don't know anything about evolution in zoonotic transfer. And like, if you knew anything about evolution, you would know that it's guaranteed that this virus is a natural zoonotic transfer. And so in the beginning, you might have had a few scientists, but now at this point, I don't think there's any scientists that are publicly saying it was a bioweapon.
No, it wasn't a lot of people that said it, and it was right at the beginning when it first came out. People have. It's funny that you're saying, like, evolution is basically something that people are using to beat other people over the head with in order to make them come to their same conclusions.
It's a circular logic. You're saying, like, no, it couldn't be a bioweapon because it's explained by evolution. And you're saying you're just too much of a dunce to understand how evolution perfectly explains this. And it's like, okay, whatever, everyone's just too dumb. Like, they don't realize that evolution perfectly explains why coronavirus is killing us and why we can't do anything about it and why China doesn't have a problem. And you see the politics behind it, where it's like Biden is on the side of science. And the U.S. would have beat coronavirus just like China, but Trump is corrupt. And if you elect Biden, Biden will follow the scientist, and we will beat coronavirus just like China.
Yeah, that was your tagline, right? Vote for Biden and have to wear the mask for 6 months. Was that?
But he's not going to say that, but I said that's why he's going to lose by a landslide. It's like, vote for Biden, and he will force you to wear a mask. And they're like, no, I'm not going to vote for a dude who's going to force me to wear a mask.
It's like a revenge of the nerd kind of thing. It's like, oh, you people, you're made me feel bad all my whole life. Now I get to force you to wear a mask. Ha 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 ha. No, I'm the authority.
But it's designed in a way where Biden is the righteous person that is justifiably doing what's needed to reduce suffering, as where Trump is a person who only cares about himself and doesn't care if suffering is increased on everybody as long as his own personal suffering is being decreased. So, I mean, that's the element, and it's given a scientific narrative that the problem with Trump is that he's just oblivious to scientific truth, and that's why there's 200,000, God forbid, almost dead people in America, and China has beat the coronavirus. But from a different perspective of saying like, okay, like I'm not a virus expert, I don't know enough about evolution, but just looking at the fact that China like seems to have gotten over it and no problem, and the U.S. and India are getting the hell knocked out of us by this virus, that it could be like, well, yeah, maybe China made this virus in a way that they're beating it and we're not because it was designed that way. So if you're going to say that's impossible because of evolution, but you're just saying like logic, like the facts on the ground, how is it possible that China is just like completely beating this virus no problem, and India and the US are getting that, you're dropping like flies?
That's a very interesting perspective. I think this mania, this increased hysteria is yeah, it's a consequence of looking for answers within the pre-existing systems when the pre-existing systems are themselves flawed, and you go to apply the axioms over and over, and the flaw it biases the measurements. You have multiple measurement bias over and over. It's like they're trying to find an explanation for what's going on within the evolution paradigm, and then they look at it and it's like, oh, it's already got a bunch of different strains. Well, that doesn't really fit into the evolution paradigm very well. And you kind of got to look at how they even sequence these things in the first place. Like, it's not that straightforward a process because you pretty much have to go, well, nearly to the molecular level to do it. Like, I don't think they have scanning, tunneling microscopes at all these locations.
Yeah, I've shown on Week in Reviewer the 5 streams that we've done, basically the extent of the scientific knowledge about what's happening. And it's actually not that much. I mean, to some extent of the mechanism, we understand, the microbiology of COVID-19 perfectly. We have its genome mapped out. We know exactly how it operates, what it does, a lot of the exact atomic level knowledge of what's going on, but that doesn't change the fact that we can't stop it. And the question of the origins of it, we're just saying like, oh, no, you're dumb. Like anybody who understood evolution would know that it's just a natural process of evolution, that there's viruses that evolve in the stomachs of animals and then transfer over to humans. And it takes us a few years till we could create a vaccine. And besides for like shutdowns and social distancing, until we create this vaccine, there's nothing we can do about it. And all the experts on evolution just here to tell you that, yes, that's the fact, that's the reality, even though it's probably beyond your level of understanding. Even though from some level I showed you that for not much more than $10,000 of equipment, you actually could create your own coronavirus. That it's not like some huge phenomenon that for, God forbid, tens of thousands of dollars, a B-rate lab technician could possibly create a deadly virus.
I don't know if they're actually at the point where they can create viruses. I think they could harvest them from living animals and possibly promote some type of
you could
evolution.
write out the DNA code of a deadly virus and grow it, saying it's not a phenomenon beyond the control of science, that if you had the genome, if someone came up with the genome of a virus for the purpose of being a weapon, that it wouldn't take more than tens of thousands of dollars of equipment to print the genome of the virus and then to grow a strain of it, and then, God forbid, to turn into a weapon and infect other people. It's not this like unknown to scientific phenomenon. It's actually not that complicated. It's a known thing that you could print out genomes and then create strains of viruses. We do it all the time. That's how vaccines are created. And it's something that factually only requires a certain minimal level of lab equipment. And if you had the know-how in the lab equipment, you could create a virus. And whether a person it evolved, so to say, saying like, we know, like, no, it had to have been evolved in the stomach of a pangolin or a bat and somehow got transferred over, versus the possibility that someone came up with this idea purposely and printed out the genome and grew their own strain of the virus and then purposely infected people, to rule that out of the realm of possibility scientifically, because you say it's impossible, from all of the research I've seen, is actually it's quite possible and it's actually feasible. Not it doesn't even take Jeffrey Epstein. It's possible that like some genius in their basement with only tens of thousands of dollars of equipment could have done it, like one of these bombers, like the Unabomber or something like that. That God forbid, creating a virus is so easy that it could have been one lone genius with only a few $100,000 that did it.
Do you have anything written explaining people doing this type of thing?
Well, I mean, you need the scientific basic of someone who would understand what it takes to create a virus. And I showed you the equipment, like the Fisher technology or whatever, even lab roots, where you could buy printing machines that print genomes. And it's not necessarily an easy thing that you could just buy a genome printer and print a virus and grow a strain. It requires quite a bit of expertise, but it's not because you need like billions of dollars of equipment. A simple printer of a genome and then printing strains and then growing that strain within like an egg or the various things that they use to grow virus strains, and then God forbid infecting people doesn't require a huge conspiracy. It's conceivable that one random person did this whole thing. And for science to say like, no, that's completely impossible. It's impossible that some high IQ genius designed this thing in their basement and made it in their basement. And Doovid is telling you from everything I've researched and known, I would tell you, yes, it's conceivable and very possible that any given person could have made this thing in their basement.
Well, it's an interesting theory.
It's not a theory, it's an assessment of the current state of science. So it's one thing if you're telling Doovid is factually telling you something about the current state of technology that anyone in the chat, like JF or someone, could say, yes, what Doovid is saying is correct. You could print out a DNA strand and have it strung together and then inserted into a cell, and the cell produced the virus, and then you would have a strain of the virus that if it infected people, and saying that someone could factually say, yes, you could do it, and it's not a phenomenal thing. It's possible that you could do it for a price range, and Doovid is saying it's only tens of thousands of dollars, and saying, yes, any biologist could have confirmed this is a fact, this is a phenomenon of engineering, it's not unbeknownst. So then is the question of, yeah, but could someone have created this code and known that this virus would have been the one in possible or conceivable, and say, well, did someone just get lucky that someone created, came upon this code and made a virus of it, and then it caught on, God forbid. And from what I'm seeing, that yeah, everything that I'm studying says yes, it's possible. And unfortunately, everyone I'm saying from the scientific community is saying that's completely impossible. There's no way that happened. And I mean, I don't know anyone in the chat or anyone who's following this, even to Brett Weinstein, like said on their show with that interview, and said like, yeah, from everything he sees, like it's not that difficult to make a virus. You don't need like the conspiracy even involving the government of China, like JF, even someone with JF's know-how level, God forbid, I'm not saying he would do such a thing. But probably could create a virus.
I'm just looking at an article from 2018 UC Berkeley. They have invented a new way to synthesize DNA that promises to be easier and faster, does not require toxic chemicals, and potentially is more accurate. With greater accuracy, the technique could produce DNA strands 10 times longer than today's methods. So it doesn't look like this is really all that far along.
Now, I'm saying you could print an RNA. There's different things like reverse transcriptase. So like basically, if you have a string of DNA or RNA, you could convert it using live human cells, or there's certain parts of cells like reverse transcriptase or these things that can change RNA to DNA that could be done outside of a human cell. But the fact that you could print a protein letter by letter is just a fact of science. It's not super complicated. It's known. you could take a genomic sequence and print it. And past a certain, it's not like something easy. I'm not saying I would be able to do it. It involves lab expertise, and then splicing it. Coronavirus has like 30,000 base pairs, and past a certain level of base pairs, it has to be spliced. And then the process is feeding the created RNA sequence, possibly first through like reverse transcriptase, or to duplicate it, and then feeding it into a cell culture to replicate. So the original vaccines are man-made viruses. And I think like a lot of people are confused of what vaccines are. But I mean, for people who don't understand what I'm talking about, that is the process that we do to create vaccines. We do go through this exact process.
Yeah, but we start with actual normal virus cells. We don't print them. They're just there, and then they're grown, and then some stuff is done to them.
I was saying 300 years ago, we already had vaccines from cell cultures, and back like the first like rabies vaccine, when they didn't even know what a virus was, and they grew like in chickens or in egg cultures where they took dormant versions of the virus, usually grow it in eggs, and then that's your vaccine, that they isolate a certain compound of the virus that is dormant and activates the antibodies without replicating the virus, and that's how the vaccine works. But the original vaccines were created from Jennifer, were just an isolate of if it was cowpox or something, that the deadly strand of smallpox that was killing people, but the cowpox strand didn't kill people and created an antibody that defended against smallpox. But you didn't have to take cowpox at a certain point. It could be grown in a culture. So modern day viruses can be designed and printed. All of the major companies know how to do this and do it. So historically, yes, we had the method of growing cultures and what percent of them are printed, but I'm saying this is known, accepted technology that you could just order a machine straight off the internet and possibly do in your basement lab. And I mean, are you disagreeing that this is that the technology I'm saying exists?
Well, I'm looking up. I don't know a whole lot about this subject, but it says current DNA synthesis, which dates from 1981 and uses techniques from organic chemistry labs, is limited to directly producing so-called oligonucleotides about 200 bases long. So this is very short, comparatively speaking, to most life forms. So this is because inevitable errors in the process lead to low yield of correct sequences. Now, what wouldn't be very difficult is harvesting some original virus samples, growing them, because they can self-replicate spontaneously, and then attempting to do something to them, which is, as you said, how vaccines work. And I think that the evidence does support a narrative basically like that. Like the first human transmission was from a sample gathered from a bat cave.
Yeah, so we'll have to look more. And I did the research before to show the type machinery that you could buy on the open market to print DNA, and the physical maximum levels of how many base pairs you could print, and then the different methods for splicing these different ones. So if coronavirus has 30,000 base pairs and you could only get up to 200 base pairs in a printing, and then you have to splice them together, and then just be 30,000 base pairs is in fact beyond man-made capabilities to print a 30,000 long base pair and then grow it in a culture. So that's a factual argument about the current state of technology, and it would even be in a price range where it could be certain machineries like 3D printing or something like that, where there's machines that cost a certain amount that have a certain capability, and maybe there's some machines that could are capable of making 1,000 base pair long, and there's a whole bunch of different techniques for splicing this. And the current state of the technology is there's a lot of uncertainty in expertise level but what they're telling you is that it's impossible it was man-made. It's outside of the realm of possibility, and evolution perfectly explains why this is happening to us. That you don't even need to seek an alternative explanation like it being man-made, because evolution has a perfect, indisputable explanation to describe why this phenomenon is occurring.
And how exactly does evolution explain it? Just the idea of cross species, revenge of the pangolin or bat or something?
Well, just saying that that there's mammals in nature that have ACE2 receptors and are a larger reservoir of viruses, probably due to a larger diet like pangolins, because they like eat dirt or whatever. They live underground and stick their tongue into the ground and eat ants or bats or whatever in their environment, and the specific biology of their digestive system, that there's a larger amounts of viruses in the stomachs of pangolins and bats. And they have to have like JF, who has a PhD in biology, but that's a biological fact that for whatever reason these animals like the pangolin and bats have a significantly higher number of viruses that reside in their stomach, and they have certain elements that are the exact same as humans, namely these ACE2 receptors. So normal evolutionary processes that cause mutations and adaptations of natural selection are more likely to occur in the stomach of a bat or pangolin, just because there's a higher amount of viruses there and various other reasons that they say that this virus unquestionably evolved in the stomach of a bat or a pangolin and transferred from species to species. And the reason, it's a new novel coronavirus because it's never been in man, because it evolved in the stomachs of bats. And this is a process that occurs and has been occurring and will continue to occur. And evolution largely completely understands the process, even though we don't understand how to stop the process or what we could do about it. But the phenomenon, according to science, is unquestionably, so to say, solved. So much so that that an alternative explanation for the origins of COVID-19 does not need to be sought.
Yeah, I mean, it does appear to be how it's being presented.
And that's why I'm comparing it to Aryan invasion theory. And generally, the karma of that is different, because generally the impetus for almost all Western universities still teaching the Aryan invasion theory is because the Aryan invasion theory was largely the intellectual justification for colonialization and the stealing of the wealth from India. And so when you look at institutes in England and America, and you think those were built up on the theft of India, and the wealth of England and America came from the plundering of India. And the reason why Harvard and Yale and Oxford and all these places still teach the Aryan invasion theory is a karmatic balance, that they have to teach it in order to justify the wealth and the karmatic factor that the wealth that they're sitting on was taken from India. So that there's a reason why the elites, because the elites, saying how we may not have the benefits of the plundering of India at the same level that the elites, but Howie also, even on his, so to say, low karmatic level, is also, we call it white privilege or something, but white privilege doesn't just refer to slavery and the mistreatment of African Americans. It also refers to the plundering of Indians, saying that Howie is wealthier than he would have been had, the white man, the blue-eyed man, not colonialized India. And all of these institutions like Harvard, Yale, Oxford, and Cambridge that are still perpetuating the Aryan invasion theory have a bias to do it, because they're saying, yes, we stole this and plundered from India, and we're going to keep it, it's ours. And so that's why, the ultimate karmatic, so to say, message behind the elite propagation of Aryan invasion theory, because it's the propagation of not wanting to pay reparations for karmatically plundering India, and the karmatic implications for evolution and coronavirus are different, but probably similar to why things like Aryan invasion theory are almost universal among the elites, because the elites are almost all universally culpable in the plundering of India.
Well, I don't know how I could possibly top that. I was starting to feel like I was being gaslighted, like nobody else saw that simple thing. It's so obvious to me, but I'm glad that you also see it.
And all Hindus, like anybody who took Hinduism seriously, would just see that. Like, the Aryan invasion theory is false. And the reason that people believe it, especially the elites, is because they're using it to cover up for the plundering and stealing of the wealth of India. And so, like,
So
anyone
how
in
is
India,
kind of
like, has a
all
natural.
the elites right now without knowing it.
That what?
How he's kind of like a golem for the elites.
Well, it's like white privilege. So Aryan invasion theory is like, I don't have white privilege. Haven't you heard of Aryan invasion theory? And saying like, no, like, Howie, you have white privilege, and the wealth that's being used to sustain your wealth, your white privilege, was in fact stolen from India.
Well, maybe not all of it, but yeah.
But I'm saying that's his bias there when he says, I don't have white privilege. I deserve everything that I have. He's like, no, in fact, you have more than you deserve. And the source of the more than you deserve is the plundering of India.
Yep. And the whole feeling guilty about stuff, I think it only goes so far, but I think if you don't acknowledge the facts, you're just going to be plagued by guilt. That's kind of what I think. And you get this like weird creeping feeling of, imposter syndrome. And that's kind of my biggest fear, is to get into a debate that I can't win. Anytime I've ever felt like really nervous was always a time when there was a chance that would happen. Mostly when I was younger.
I mean, Brutus agreed with you that Aryan invasion theory was false, right? Even Brutus.
No, Brutus is pro-Aryan invasion theory. He did a huge, big stream about how great the white people were and how wonderful they were for bringing civilization to the world. And white, whitey, white. That was basically his. I'm summarizing here, but that was basically. He's definitely pro-Aryan Kangs, and he called me a Jew because I disagreed with it.
Yeah. So, but his scholarship on the Vedas is rather limited. Like, he read Bhagavad Gita and was part of ISKCON, but he didn't move on to be a bigger scholar besides like the Bhagavad Gita or his experience in ISKCON. But I would say my experience, like anybody who's studied the Vedas or Indian culture a little bit, recognizes that Aryan invasion theory is almost definitely historically not true, and that the reason why all the elites in the West support it was because that was the theory, that was the intellectual justification behind colonialization.
Well, that was a very good summary of it.
It is saying like you don't have to have, you could have a 70 IQ in India and understand that. He's like, oh yeah, Aryan invasion theory, that's the the nonsense that the blue-eyed man like used to steal our shit.
Yeah, so all you Aryan Kangs genealogists, you guys are committing a great sin. Don't people have any superstition that they're going to get cursed by astral entities for speaking such
No,
filth?
I'm saying, I think you're improperly analyzing karma. You're saying ignorance is the natural condition, and the natural perspective is for a person to think that everything they have they deserve. In fact, that like I was saying to Luke, generally almost all Jews think the system is rigged against us, even though from a more accurate objective perspective, the system is actually relatively rigged in favor of us. But that perspective of using these things, like things are either rigged for you or against you, and it's the natural inclination to think that things are rigged against you, and what you have is because you deserve it. And actually, even if you have a lot, that I deserve what I have and probably much more. And so when it comes to certain things, like, of course, Howie thinks he deserves everything he has, and things are rigged against him, in reality, he deserves even more than he has. And so if someone's going to come like, no, actually, you don't even deserve what you have. there's going to be pushback, and so like a bias of someone going to be like, well, this theory supports that I deserve everything that I have and have more coming to me. Of course, like that. It's not like you have to have like some sort of sinful nature. Just the natural conditions of the mode of ignorance and passion would say, like, yeah, I would expect a guy like Howie to believe in Aryan invasion theory due to purely the forces of ignorance and passion.
Right. And if he had better karma, he would not say those things because he'd be afraid of the consequences of saying them. Because there is karma associated with speaking whatever words you choose to speak. They sort of ripple out and shape other people's ideas and put momentum out there.
Anyone in the audience here heard of Brutus?
Geez, the people, I'm not really recognizing anybody. I know that guy, I think he was Catholic and Irish. Do you remember him? The one who had a fight on Brutus's and got kicked off the one time. He was in the chat a few times.
But
I really
our
wish I
audience
had
now has
that.
completely changed. Like none of these people like remember that debate or even heard of him.
Yeah, that wasn't even supposed to be a debate that time I went on his stream. It was supposed to be a friendly conversation, but it turned into a horrible debate, and he was so triggered that he had to have Norman Hobbs on afterwards to like shit talk me. And I remember I had to get up super early for that debate, and I was just like blown away that somebody could be so unprofessional. But I guess that's more or less I always sort of expect that to some extent. But yeah, I wish I had that on tape because that was definite dumpster fire if I ever saw one. And it was over the Aryan invasion theory because I guess it's like a pillar of these people's understanding of history that this is just like granted as taken as true, and it's it's not a good idea to believe false things because reality will eventually catch up. Why put it off?
So what's the deal? No one wants to come on.
Well, I think you pretty much destroyed the Aryan invasion theory, so Howie probably doesn't want to come on and have to defend it. He's probably realizes he's on pretty shaky ground. So
yeah, I mean, it'd just be like me arguing both sides or something, like, because I really want a good debate, and I would have to basically argue Howie's side for him to make it a good debate. It's not his fault. I'm saying,
I don't even know how I would frame that. Like, if I was going to take the opposite side and promote Aryan invasion theory, I don't even know how I would frame it. Like,
you don't become an expert in something without hard work. And something like Aaron, there's a reason why Doowovid has a huge library behind him, and I've read a lot of books, and like I know you're Durgadas. I know, like I'm friends with him. Friends, like I studied under even someone that he respects for his, Stephen Knapp Srinandana, for his writing on, who's part of ISKCON, but still made point in his literature to defeat Aryan invasion theory, and has written, widely respected literature among the Indian Hindu community that's almost authoritative. It's kind of racism. Like I showed that late show of Namarasa, and God forbid, it's just kind of like anti-Indian racism, and you're saying that's really all it is, and Aryan invasion theory is like a structure. It's a form of structural anti-Indian racism that when you get to these elite institutes, that these people do not believe your account of your own history and have this butchered, negative, pejorative account of your own history that they teach about you in their institutes.
So I guess the most persecuted people are the Indians, by far.
Well, I mean, intellectually, I was saying, God forbid if you're talking about slavery or something, like, no, okay, that's not like even the plundering of India could be different. Like, I don't think in America, no one's seriously thinking about like giving India back reparations. Maybe in England, you would say like, okay, even like economic, and just like the downfall of England, in that now Indians you can become the management class in Britain due to karma. But I mean, compared to the karmatic obligation to African Americans, wouldn't be comparable to the effect of Aryan invasion theory being taught in American universities.
Well, it sort of robs the Europeans of their heritage as well, doesn't it? It deracinates them and makes them stupid idiots who can't learn anything and basically worthless, yet also somehow mystically super arrogant for no good reason.
But who cares? Because it's our excuse for partying away with the wealth of India. Saying that, like, as we have our, God forbid, like orgies and degenerate parties based on the plundered wealth of India, and could care less about philosophy. And I was even thinking about eBay. I was noticing, which is a common trend, that most of my best items, expensive, interesting items, are being sold to Chinese people, not like in China, but like in the West, in America. But Chinese people in America are buying the best of my items. And it's probably a combination of acquired wealth, having the wealth to acquired, and the value of, Doooovid has the best of the Western canon for sale at discount prices. But the people watching Week in Review, they could care less. They don't care about the best of the Western canon. But these Chinese people know and appreciate and are willing to pay higher prices for the best of the Western canon. And, we're talking classical music. And, saying like Doooovid could list names and names, because like kind of the Jew, like the Chinese people now who over, like my grandparents, the old uber educated Jew who, felt that they had to know the Western canon in order to, be a powerful Jew in the West, that the Jews have gotten complacent and lazy and don't really know the Western canon anymore. But like 70 years ago, when the greatest composers were disproportionately Jewish, now that same thing is happening with the Chinese. And if like you're German, it's like Jennifer, like honor your German ancestors by mastering the canon of classical music. There's probably not going to be too many takers, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of Chinese people, for whatever reason, that have an interest in mastering the Western canon of classical music.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of the nouveau riche thing. They get wealthy in America and then want to show off their wealth with various collector items.
I think it's more culture. I mean, there's certain things they're showing off wealth, and there's certain knowledge of culture. So you may be owning them, but I think a lot of these are more probably people that actually know and appreciate music. And Doooovid is saying not just like as a wealth symbol that some Chinese guy is buying this up, but that some Chinese guy actually understands the Western canon of classical music better than Westerners. And anyone involved in music, Nick, if he's in the chat, would say like, yeah, like in the West, like virtuosos of violins and piano, like a lot of times they're Chinese. And if you go to a local symphony orchestra and want to hear someone playing Beethoven, like even in Montreal, it wouldn't surprise me if like 20% of the orchestra is Chinese. And it's not necessarily, it's an interesting status symbol, the fact that like, no, you're not talking like a McMansion, because your average person wants a McMansion, that there's a different element or like degeneracies, that there's a higher element of status of a Chinese person that's going to truly appreciate the best of the Western canon, like classical music.
Oh, definitely a very interesting statistic to note. Yeah, I have no trouble believing that at all.
I know from other things,
the trend will continue.
Wine, there's a difference, like selling wine, luxury items, where they're known like the biggest buyers are also in China.
Well, China's just started to like have a bubble of wine producers, hasn't it? Like a bunch of people have been getting into that Chinese wine production. I read about that.
Yeah, but there's not high quality. By saying the best wine in the world is very clear. Almost everyone agrees upon the best wines in the world, and they have market value prices. Most of them coming out of France, but some different places. And a lot of the biggest sales go to China as a luxury item, and it's a difference with a perishable, like a wealthy Chinese businessman who says, I'm gonna get drunk tonight drinking the most expensive bottle of wine as a symbol of status, versus a person. And most of these people buying this stuff are probably not rich Chinese. They're probably like music students or poor, because most of them are, pretty strenuously like negotiating prices and trying to get me to like better deals to drop my prices. Maybe like a few white boomers buy my stuff at full price. Like almost all the Chinese people negotiate prices with me. It's only like a few white boomers that just pay full price for things. But you're saying the venerable thing of the actual Western canon, that's not so much a virtue. Like if you're, like having your kid play violin and playing like famous pieces from hundreds of years ago of the most famous European composers is a different sort of status virtue signal that Doovid thinks is intrinsically honorable and noteworthy, different than like wine drinking.
Can you give us some examples of
It's also like mathematics. Saying like calculus is largely, mathematics is largely something that comes from the Western canon. However, if you go to university and you had a calculus professor, all these things, even though your math book is going to tell you, just name after Europeans who came up with these ideas, that in all likelihood, your professor, even in Toronto or Montreal, might be Asian Chinese. And it's an aspect of, saying this is your heritage, saying like, JF, you're French, saying that calculus was developed by the French. But if you go to university, it's not going to be JF or a French man teaching you calculus. It's more likely to be a Chinese man teaching you, or a Korean or Asian person teaching you calculus. And it's not because it's because the French man doesn't understand their own historic wisdom that came from their people, and the best people. Just like when you have the concert and you want the best violin player to play the famous piece, and it turns out the local best violin player in Montreal is is a Chinese virtuoso. Just chalk it up. Okay, the Chinese person worked harder, and and therefore plays the violin better. So when we're gathering together to hear the most famous pieces, it makes sense that we're gathering to watch a Chinese person.
Interesting, yeah. I haven't really followed much of this stuff, but it's interesting.
There's not Indians.
What kind of products are you selling? I'm just curious. Like, can you give us a few examples of these high-end products you're thinking of?
Well, I showed here, Nick, if he's watching, I sent out like $50 in shipping. Hope he gets. But here is these are new CDs that I haven't put up yet, but just been bringing in. I'm gonna have a lot more coming. Here, those CDs on the floor were my box sets of classical music, and actually they've been going. I have less than I sold probably over 60%, a few $1,000s worth of box sets, but those were the more expensive, which are usually complete recordings of famous classical work, composers, or performing the best of the Western canon. So even names like Zinman, like David Zinman, Fritz Reiner, so it's a certain name. Maybe Nick Petrus, would have heard of someone like Fritz Reiner, but probably even Nick hasn't heard of Fritz Reiner. But Fritz Reiner, I got a few $100s for the complete. Fritz Reiner was the conductor for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra for like decades, and performed most of the greatest pieces of the Western classic. Because like if you're in a major city, there's a symphony orchestra, and there's probably a famous conductor that is head of the symphony orchestra, and most of what they play are probably the greatest classics of the Western canon. Like, Beethoven, Verdi, Bach, and all these various things. And so there's box sets of complete collections of this stuff. And like saying like you can't get a CD of Beethoven playing the piano, but you could get a CD of Beethoven's 9 symphonies, and almost all of the great conductors did Beethoven's 9th Symphony, or like Bruckner's 9 symphonies. So you could get Leonard Bernstein doing Beethoven's 9 symphonies, or Karyakin doing Beethoven's 9 symphonies, or going back. And some of these recordings go back, like Fritz Reiner these recordings are going back from like 70, 80 years ago. These are recordings in the Chicago Symphony Orchestra that were played decades ago, but were high quality recordings and are relatively rare, so they're worth hundreds of dollars. And they maintain their value. In fact, internationally, I just shipped some stuff to Australia. I sold something today to Jane's Addiction, actually a rock CD, a bootleg CD, to Belgium. Someone wanted the CD badly enough that I sold them the CD for $15, but they wanted it so badly that they paid $24 in shipping to get it in Europe. And some of the stuff I had are thank God my dad found good stuff that he bought, high quality stuff that was printed in limited recordings and has a substantial value.
Well, congratulations. It sounds like your business is going really well. Did you say you're up above $1,000 a week now?
I went, well, I had been, but I think my numbers are back down because I put up my more expensive stuff, and I sold quite a bit of that. So now I'm back down to probably even less than $100 a day, maybe like $500 a week, because most of my expensive stuff sold. And like of the single CDs, you got to sell a lot of stuff. Like even to make $100 a day, I got to sell like 15, 20 CDs a day. So but the more rare, I listed the more expensive rare items first, because I thought I wanted to sell them first in order to make the money so I could buy an iPad if I wanted or whatever. So I've already done that. Even if you had a trust fund, even if you had large sums of money, you could argue, I mean, there's karmatic trade-offs, but it's good to be involved in business, and it's good to be buying and selling things. And really, it's a sign of wisdom, of the most extreme form of intelligence, to recognize good deals. And to be an international person, and it doesn't mean like CDs or whatever. It could be like art or houses or certain objects that for whatever reason are cheap to get in one place and are worth more in a different place. And it's a cultured person that recognizes, like, yes, it makes sense that in this place they're selling this to me for this price, in that place I could sell it for a much higher price, and that I will be the middleman of that transaction. And karmatically, then any people watch Week in Review, or like Jennifer or Gandalf, it's just like, oh, I got a deal where someone was offering to sell a whole bunch of this thing for a certain price, and I bought it, and I've been selling it here and there and make a continual amount of money. So it's a good way to be involved in something interesting. CDs, learn about music in the Western tradition, and it's a source of income where I don't spend more than like 30 minutes a day doing my eBay business. So at this point, if it's just like 30 minutes, maybe an hour a day, and I could pocket $100 a day, it's a pretty good deal. It's a pretty good supplemental part-time business that, to some respect, anybody watching this show could do. They could find a product. The Talmud gives the example. Oh, I mentioned Jennifer, that the 3 marriages. She said she set up 2 people in marriages, and the Talmud says, you set up 3 people in successful marriages, that you're guaranteed a place in the world to come, which is an interesting, factor. You could argue from like a genetic or type, superstition, to believe that, what aspect, what does it mean to have a share in the world to come, and why is it that if you successfully set up 3 marriages, that would, so to say, ensure your place in heaven. But the Talmud also says, the statement between the rabbi and the businessman, where the rabbi tells the businessman, I just do what you do. I buy low and sell high. Saying I buy low by doing good deeds in the material realm, and I sell high, that the reward for good deeds in the material realm and the spiritual realm is exponentially higher. But the aspect of business, anybody watching Week in Review with a little bit of intelligence could probably figure out a way to buy low and sell high. There's something that you walk around, you see, you're like, oh wow, I could buy low and then sell high.
Yeah, it's funny how simple it is, yet how few people truly understand this concept. But
And also the price discovery is complicated. When I mention, like, okay, Doovid gets more money for my products because Chinese people value the Western tradition more than Westerners. That if Doovid is sitting here telling, like, this is, from the best of the Western tradition, but, like, here's Week in Review and all these Westerners, they could give a crap. They don't care about this stuff. But there's some Chinese person that's like, oh, wow. You're like, no, you're right. Like, I've heard of this composer, and that really is indicative of the best of the Western culture. And I will pay you, a higher price for it. And the eBay nature of capitalism will go to the highest bidder. And so the point of the saying is that, yes, Chinese people at this point, Doovid could, factually tell from the open marketplace that, like, I'm just noticing a lot of my best products, I'm sending them to Chinese names. And that does probably have karmatic ramifications that anybody watching this show, could probably, so to say, and if it's meant like I give the example of physics and calculus, that almost all of physics and calculus is derived out of the Western tradition, but there has been a change within the last few decades where in university, where you would not expect the biggest experts in these fields that derive from the Western tradition, and it would not be surprising at all when you get to university and your biggest experts in calculus and physics are in fact Asian, even though the field largely derives from the Western tradition.
I've definitely heard the claim made that the Chinese came up with calculus as well. So that might be a bit of a hot button issue. But
no, I'm saying like the Industrial Revolution, like the Vedas are saying, like, yeah, the formulas of calculus are in the Vedas, but I mean a formalized intellectual system that in India or China in the last 1,000 years that they had such a thing, there's almost no evidence. And even like, the scientific revolution, the creation of industrialization and engineering is largely what fuels colonialization, is technological superiority. And saying, like, I mean, you can make the Chinese and the Indians and the Jews always knew calculus, it was in the Bible, but like the fact is, like, no, like we have the names of the people who wrote the books, we have the books that these people wrote, that's what's studied in university, and we have the engineering history of what these people created and how that led to largely the factors of colonialization with terms like the gun, weaponry, nuclear weapons, the airplane, in these things that it's pretty clear that it came from the Western canon. But just like German manufacturing expertise, where now there's a certain level, no, I mean, factually, the Germans may still be better than the Japanese or South Koreans, but most people think that German manufacturing expertise is only about equal to Japanese market expertise, and most other European countries are not even better than China. In terms of manufacturing, China currently in the 21st century, 2020 market value, that except for Germany, you would not expect a European produced product to be better than a Chinese produced one.
I suppose it depends who you ask. There's less manufacturing in the European countries in diaspora, for sure, than there used to be. I think it's just a lot cheaper in China, so that corporations have been moving over there for their manufacturing base.
So Doovid is saying it's a know-how basis, and that the understanding of mathematics and physics is actually superior there.
Okay, I've heard a lot of things that would go against that narrative, but I take your point.
And Doovid saying that from the engineer, from the money company perspective, and even things like patents, where if you're actually giving a sizable, measurable things like the number of patents filed in China versus the number of patents filed in Poland or any European country, not Germany, that they're not just talking like theoretical university type stuff. You're talking dollar GDP building, and it's not because Europeans are looking to cheaply build things in China. It's because the Chinese people factually understand how to do these things better than us, not just cheaper than us. The Chinese aren't a good example. I'm saying like everybody agrees that the Japanese and the South Koreans know how to do the stuff better than us. Like that there's no really disputable, that's just open market value product where you say like, no, like I'm not a dummy. I buy Japanese products because they're better. And like I trust that these Japanese engineers probably understand the science better. And that's why they make a better product.
Yeah. Where do you think people would talk about these kinds of ideas?
Well,
Like, I guess
engineering.
it's like macroeconomics kind of thing.
Well, I mean, Doovid knows because, like you're saying, because any engineer goes to these conferences, and you have to know the companies, and there's the global supply chain. Detroit is the auto city, and the global supply chain for the automotive company. You go to the convention, and you see where these companies are from, and you see the pecking order. Like I was at University of Michigan, and you're saying like, like I didn't know you probably could look up. You could just Google and look up the racial demographics of math teachers at your various university, but the phenomenon of getting to university and taking calculus and having an Asian be your teacher is a common phenomenon across all of the US and even Europe. And even though you're learning about Lagrangians and Hamiltons and Newton and Leibniz, and you're not learning about like Chinese and Indian people, you're learning it from someone from the East, not from Europe. And there's a few.
I'm trying to remember what it was like for me in university. I seem to remember quite a few Eastern European professors, both in math and physics. I don't know how many Chinese no one's coming to mind as a Chinese professor.
When we're talking Ottawa, the diversity there might be less than like University of Michigan, State University of New York. Like Doovid was in State University of New York and University of Michigan, and I had one Russian calculus teacher. I had a few, I had a Syrian calculus teacher, but there was quite a, in Korean, but even in Stony Brook, like I already had Asian calculus teachers, and the phenomenon is common that I've spoken to people across, like even the memes about the accents and not being able to understand your TA. And then, the actual prize level, where if you're actually looking at math competitions, Doovid competed at math in high school, like, competed at chess, but I also competed at math. And, even going back over 20 years when I was in high school, I competed against Asians that even though there weren't that many Asians in the whole state, and I didn't even know that many Asians, when I got to the state championship for the math competitions, my toughest competition were Asians. And so I think anyone in the U.S. who's competed in these fields, would recognize that, say like, okay, you're not just like some person making conjecture. You're saying like, no, I competed in math competitions, and I'm pretty sure that like the people that beat me were Asian.
Well, it sounds perfectly reasonable to me. I was in a spelling contest when I was in grade 6, I think. I'm trying to remember what the demographics were like there. It was in Montreal. I don't even think I remember because it was just so focused on the spelling contest itself. So I know now they're all dominated by Indians, though, in the States. The winners of the spelling contest is always some Indian name.
Yeah, in fact, they even made like a movie about the Hare Krishnas that included like a spelling bee with Richard. I can't even think of that name. The guy who died, famous actor from like the Dead Poets Society and various things, where he plays like this professor whose son becomes a Hare Krishna, and he's like training his daughter. I think it's called like Bee Season. Let me. You would know the name of this. I don't know why it's this name slipping me. Bee Season 2008 film with what's Richard Gere. Not someone else. Richard Gere plays the professor who is like ruthlessly training his daughter so that she could win a spelling competition. Well, meanwhile, his son becomes a Hare Krishna, and his wife is like some kind of like thief. Or it's really kind of like a pathetic movie. But they were saying that movie, even Richard Gere is the spelling bee movement includes his son becoming a Hare Krishna, although there's no Indians in the movie.
What's it called again?
Bee season.
Bee season. Okay, I'll check it out. Thanks for the recommendation.
But there's a certain like of Anglo culture, like spelling, proper grammar and spelling, that maybe like Luke would have been indicative of Anglo culture, where it's not surprising now that the excellence in the field that anybody, even if you're in a white area and like don't have that much experience in diversity, was like, no, I competed in the spelling bee competition, and the person who beat me was Indian.
Yeah, it seems to be the way things are going.
Okay, so I actually rolled like 6 joints. I was just chopping it up. It was going smooth. So what's the deal? What do you want to do? I mean, it's 10:30. We've been at for 3 hours. Do you want to play some clips and talk more, or you just want to end the show?
Maybe I'll just play that one clip and we can end the show right now, and you can go enjoy your 6 trees. And I thought it was a great show. I really enjoyed what we talked about, and I especially love the audience questions. It really means a lot to me that people are curious and listening, and I'll do my best to answer the questions as clearly as I can.
Which clip are you going to play?
I have just like a mini compilation of Weinstein talking to Wolfram.
Oh yeah, that one was really good. So if that inspires audience questions or the conversation to continue, that subject was really interesting. I thought that was good. So it's up to you. So I'll stay signed in, and if you want to play the clips and there's audience questions and go on, that's fine. Or you can end the show, and because I think we caught up.
I'll probably wrap it up because I'm pretty hungry. I don't think I have it in me to keep going for much longer, but I'll play it and then we can discuss it on the next show and even replay it because it's not very long. And yeah, it'd be exciting to go into that and hopefully get some people to come on the show. I know Kashif wants to come on. He said he wants to do his own stream and just talk about his own theory, but I'm also trying to encourage him to come on. We can review at some stage because I think it's great. It's challenging and it's an opportunity for self-improvement. So, why not give it a go?
We're almost at the point, where we could kind of, make the rounds in streaming, presenting our theories, like, JF and his revolutionary theory type. It's like, yes, and today, Doooovid, I have JF, author of Revolutionary Phenotype, and we're going to talk about his new book. And, to say that Doooovid or Jennifer would produce material on our various ideas to make the rounds, presenting it. And I think we're approaching that level. And so that's positive. Let's say that even if it's just me and Jennifer talking, I think we're going to see fruit from the intellectual endeavors of forwarding our ideas. And obviously, we can review Doooovid's hosted on Jennifer's channel, and she develops a following or connection from the audience, and the people that are more interested in Doooovidism could migrate to my channel, though I don't have a regular stream right now, and I'm looking, to figure out a proper venue to forward and finalize kind of like my research before I'm, so to say, have enough of a product to make the rounds and present, Doooovid's polished research ideas. And I think Jennifer's relatively at a similar point, so that's why we could have a weekend review where just Doooovid and Jennifer are catching up on our ideas and using our your program to bounce ideas off each other, but also the venue of advancing streaming and new personalities and helping people, and just helping people get involved in streaming and teaching and technology and tricks of the trade is important. So it's good to have a week like this where we could just catch up on what each other are thinking and the advancement of the continual theme ideas. But also we need constantly new personalities, and we like success stories. Like I'd like to see Libra and Howie and any of the people that have been in Week in Review to largely come back and be successful streamers. And that's kind of like the Devin Nash model, where it's not really applicable, but saying that, like, yeah, I mean, some guy like Howie or Libra come and they appeared on Week in Review and they come back and like, like, wow, like, I mean, they don't have to be like, wow, thanks Doooovid, thanks Jennifer, but it's saying like, yeah, like it worked. I became on Week in Review, and now I'm getting invites onto bigger streams, and my ideas are getting more polished, and my viewership is up, my subs are up, and even if someone's like, I'm making money, like my book is selling, or like I'm getting super chats, that would be great. And like Ethos Ananda or something like that. And you'd be like, yeah, factually, thanks, Doovid, thanks, Jennifer. Quantifiably, I'm glad I joined your circle. So appreciate that, Jennifer. And I'll just sign off, I guess. And if for some reason you're still streaming when I finish, like maybe I'll join. But otherwise, good for next week. But feel free to monologue and discuss with your chat, for as long as you want.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much. And I think the idea to polish off our respective theories to eventually get ready to make the rounds is definitely a good idea. I've sort of shied away from this because I don't really have the sense people are actually listening enough to follow the line of reasoning. So it's like, I don't just want to just hear myself talk. I really want to make sure the ideas are catching. So I've sort of outlined certain things, but without a background in physics, it would be hard to really piece together the full unified field model. So hopefully you guys enjoy these clips. Thanks for tuning in.
It's the kind of the bucket of theories of everything is not a bucket I particularly identify with.
Right, and if I can agree with
what's that?
If I can agree with Stephen, there can only be one.
No,
that was what I said today.
Actually,
there's
Eric,
a Highlander, sponsored
that's
by
one
Highlander.
of the surprising things that we've discovered is that really isn't true. You could say there's only, fair enough. I mean, it depends what you mean by only one. That's an interesting kind of ontological, epistemological question. But I mean, it's like, you could say about computation, there could only be one theory of computation and its Turing machines and its general recursive functions. The thing that's surprising about physics that has become increasingly clear is that there's this notion of, what are the underlying rules, and then how do we observe those underlying rules? And it's becoming clear that you can basically, the only thing that is absolutely rigid is the underlying rules are computational and not hypercomputational. That is, once you say that the underlying rules are purely computational, it then follows, it seems, that the things we observe from 20th century physics are inevitable consequences of that and a few other unspecific assumptions. There are more, and the observations that we have of the universe correspond to a particular, in mathematical terms, kind of fibration of this infinity groupoid thing, and that basically what our way of interpreting the universe is kind of a slice of that mathematical object. And so it's the statement, there's only one theory. In a sense, all these theories are equivalent, but the question is how we are observing them. And again, this is we can unpack this.
Again, I was. I was making a pop culture reference. The intellectual spirit of it is that you can have a summit, and there are many faces that could be used as assaults on that summit. In the end, however we traverse, Einstein, for example, came up with his divergence-free equations after some rumbling around in differential geometry. Hilbert went immediately to a Lagrangian description. They were describing something in common. So I didn't mean to suggest that there was a single description, but there can really only be one underlying theory. And
about this with my dad a little bit. How does religion relate to this?
I see it as the disease and the cure. In a sense, a few things. One is that I think a case could be made that humans are innately religious. So now we're going to get into territory where there's going to be a lot of disputes.
And by what do you mean by religious?
That religion is an evolutionary adaptation.
And religion is like a belief in something outside of yourself kind of thing?
Not necessarily. So here we got to be a little bit more careful. And again, I'm not a scholar. How about I'm a well-intentioned dilettante in this in this regard?
Yeah.
Because what I have read is that religion evolved very early on, long before our ancestors were conscious, and the issue of death arose. And that the word religion evidently is from a Latin word, regatear. We can look it up, and it means to bind. And Emile Durkheim, the dead French sociologist, he said, originally religion is Darce Lessing, who's a dead novelist. She calls it the substance of we feeling, that it's literally that it arose because we're uber social creatures who from time to time took comfort in just being in physical proximity with our fellow humans, and that there is this kind of sense of transcendent exuberance, just back to the unshakable joy that Heidegger alludes to, and that the original function of religion was to foster social cohesion and coordination, and that it was only subsequently, some claim, that a burgeoning level of consciousness made it such that religious belief systems that included the hope of some kind of immortality were just naturally selected thereafter. So there are some people, it's David Sloan Wilson, wrote a book called Darwin's Cathedral, and he said religion has nothing to do with death. It evolved to make groups viable. He's actually a group selection guy.
What's group selection?
The idea that it's the group that is selected for rather than the individual.
The individual.
Yeah, so people have vigorous disagreements about that. But I guess our point would be we see religion as being inextricably connected ultimately to assuaging concerns about death.
Well, I guess
academic and personal life. But a year or two ago, I started reading Martin Heidegger. I'm reading Being and Time. And what I now wonder is why Becker, who refers to Heidegger from time to time in his work, why he didn't take Heidegger more seriously, because Heidegger is like a secular Kierkegaard. He has the same thing, which is death anxiety. Oh, and I should have pointed out that what Kierkegaard says is that death anxiety, most people don't go to the school of anxiety. They flee from death anxiety by embracing their cultural beliefs. Kierkegaard says they then tranquilize themselves with the trivial. And I love that phrase.
That's beautiful.
It's a beautiful phrase, because at the end of the denial of death, Becker's like, look, the average American is either drinking or shopping or watching television, and they're all the same thing. Right? Heidegger says the same thing. He says, look, and he acknowledges Kierkegaard. He says, what makes us feel unsettled, and evidently that's an English translation of angst, that it's we don't feel at home in the world. Heidegger says that's death anxiety. And one direction is the Kierkegaard one. Heidegger calls it a flight from death. You just unself-reflexively cling to your cultural constructions. And Heidegger borrows the term tranquilized, but he points out that he doesn't care for that term because tranquilized sounds like you're subdued, when in fact what most culturally constructed meat puppets do is to be frenetically engaged with their surroundings to ensure that they never sit still long enough to actually think about anything consequential. Heidegger says there's a consciousness doesn't have some sort of important and highly adaptive function. And what Dawkins says is he thought about it in terms of just that we could do mental simulations, that one possibly extraordinary product of consciousness is to, rather than find out often by adverse consequences through trying something, would be to run mental simulations. And so one possibility is that consciousness is highly adaptive. Another possibility is Nicholas Humphrey, a British dude who wrote a book about, I think it's called Regaining Consciousness. And he hypothesized, I think this is 1980s, maybe even earlier, that consciousness arose as a way to better predict the behavior of others in social settings, that by knowing how I feel makes me better able to know how you may be feeling. This is like the rudiments of a theory of mind, and that it really may not have had anything to do with intelligence so much as social intelligence. And
so in that sense, consciousness is a social construct, like it's just a useful thing for interacting with other humans.
Yeah,
I don't know. So, but there seems to be something about realizing your own mortality that's somehow intricately connected to the idea of consciousness.
Well, I think so also. So this is where, and Nietzsche, he said a solitary creature would not need consciousness.
Well, what do you think?
Well, I don't know what I think about that, but what I do, and then he goes on to say that consciousness is the most calamitous stupidity by which we shall someday perish. And wow, I was like, dude,
relax.
Well, those opportunities are gone. And yeah, what's left? So Max Weber, German sociologist at the beginning of the 20th century, he said in times of historical upheaval, we are apt to embrace. He was the one who coined the term charismatic leader, right? Seemingly larger than life individuals who often believe, or their followers believe, are divinely ordained to rid the world of evil.
Yeah.
All right. Now, Ernest Becker, he used Weber's ideas in order to account for the rise of Hitler. Hitler was elected, and he was elected when Germans were in an extraordinary state of existential distress. And he said, I'm going to make Germany great again. All right. Now, what Becker adds to the equation is his claim that what underlies our affection for charismatic populist leaders, good and bad, is death anxiety. All right. Now, here's where we come in. We're egghead experimental researchers. You know, Becker wrote this book, The Denial of Death, and he couldn't get a job. People just dismiss these ideas as fanciful speculation for which there's no evidence. And
you've done some good experimental
and here's
work.
here's where I can be more cavalier, and where what I would urge people, like what you said, Lex, is ignore my histrionic and polemic language if possible, and step back if you can, myself included, and let's just consider the research findings, because in September 11th, 2001, people that are old enough to remember that horrible day, 2 days before, George W. Bush had the lowest approval rating in the history of presidential polling. All right, 3 weeks later, after he said, we will rid the world of the evildoers, And then a week or two after that, he said in a cover story on Time magazine that he believed that God had chosen him to lead the world during this, to lead the country rather, during this perilous time. He had the highest approval rating. And so what
really worries me is the quiet economic pain that people are going through, the businesses that are closed, the dreams that are broken because you can no longer do the thing that you've wanted to do. And how I mentioned to you off camera that I've been reading the Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. And I mean, the amount of anger and hatred and on the flip side of that, sort of a nationalist pride that can arise from deep economic pain. Like what happens with that economic pain is you become bitter.
Yep.
You start to find the other, whether it's other European nations that mistreated you, whether it's other groups that mistreated you.
Yep.
It always ends up being the Jews somehow are at fault here.
Yep.
That's what worries me, is where this quiet anger and pain goes in 2021, 2022, 2030. If you look, sorry to see the parallels.
No.
Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, but you know what happens 10, 15 years from now from what's because of the COVID pandemic that's happening now.
And Lex, you make I think a really profoundly important point, you know, back to our work for a bit, or Ernest Becker rather, you know, his point is that the way that we manage existential terror is to embrace culturally constructed belief systems that give us a sense that life has meaning and we have value. And in the form of self-esteem, which we get from perceiving that we meet or exceed the expectations associated with the role that we play in society. Well, here we are right now in a world where, first of all, if you have nothing, you are nothing. And secondly, as you were saying before we got started today, a lot of jobs are gone and they're not coming back.
And that's where the self-esteem.
That's where the self-esteem and identity come in. Where people, it's not only that you don't have anything to eat, you don't even have a self anymore to speak of, because we typically define ourselves, you know, as Marx put it, you are what you do. And now who are you when your way of life, as well as your way of earning a living, is no longer available?
Yeah, and it feels like that yearning for self-esteem that we could talk a little bit more, because about defining self-esteem is quite interesting. The more I've read sort of Warm at the Core and just in general your thinking, it made me realize I haven't thought enough about the idea of self-esteem. But the thing I want to say is it feels like when you lose your job, then it's easy to find, it's tempting to find that self-esteem in a tribe that's not somehow often positive.
That's exactly.
It's like a tribe that defines itself on the hatred of somebody else.
So that's brilliant. And this is what John Gray, the philosopher in the 1990s.
Dead.
That's exactly right.
So
look, that's right.
So, and then the criticism, I mean, I think these days, unfortunately, Marxism is a dirty word. I say unfortunately because even if you disagree with a philosophy, you should like calling somebody a Marxist should not be a thing that shuts down all conversation.
No, that's right. And the fact is I'm sympathetic with Jordan's dismissal of the folks in the talking heads these days who spew Marxist words. To me, it's like fashionable nonsense. Do you know that book that the physicist wrote, Mocking? You're too young. So in the 20 or so years ago.
We're all pretty young, relative.
Yeah, that's right. But I think there were these NYU physicists. They wrote a paper just mocking the kind of literary postmodern types. And
those kinds of,
and it was just nonsense. And of course, it was made the lead article. And you know, my point is Marx wouldn't be a Marxist.
True. I have read and listened to some of the work of Richard Wolff. He speaks pretty eloquently about Marxism.
I like him. Yes.
He's one of the only, one of the only people speaking about a lot about Marxism in the way we are now, in a serious way, in a sort of saying, what are the flaws of capitalism? Not saying like, yeah, basically sounding very different. And people should check out his work.
No,
because all this kind of work, this kind of outrage mob culture of sort of demanding equality of outcome. That's not Marxism.
It is not Marxism. But he didn't say that. He literally said each according to their needs and each according to their abilities or something like that.
So the question is the implementation. Like,
absolutely,
humans are messy. So how does it go wrong? Like,
it is there you go, Lex.
It's messy.
Brilliant. It's messy. And this gets back to my rant about the book that I want to try if I don't stroke out, why left and right are both beside the point.
Yeah.
The people, the conservatives are right when they condemn liberals for being simple-minded by assuming that a modification of external conditions will yield changes in human nature. Again, that's where Marx and Skinner are odd bedfellows. Here they are just saying, oh, let's change the surroundings and things will inevitably get better. On the other hand, when conservatives say that people are innately selfish, and they use that as the justification for glorifying the unbridled pursuit of wealth, well, they're only half right, because it turns out that we can be innately selfish, but we are also innately generous and reciprocating creatures. There's remarkable studies, I think they've been done at Yale, of babies, 14-month-old babies. If someone hands them a toy and then wants something in return, babies, before they can walk and talk, will reciprocate. All right, fine. If they want a toy, let's say, or a bottle of water, baby wants a bottle of water, and I look like I'm trying to give it to the baby, but I drop the bottle, so the baby doesn't get what she or he wanted. When given a chance to reciprocate, little babies will reciprocate because they're aware of and are responding to intention. Similarly, if they see somebody behaving unfairly to someone, they will not help that person in return. So my point is, yeah, we are selfish creatures at times, but we are also simultaneously uber social creatures who are eager to reciprocate. And in fact, we're congenitally prepared to be reciprocators to the point where we will reciprocate on the basis of intentions above and beyond what actually happens.
How close? So, I mean,
and then I accept your invitation, and then we can, kind of talk offline.
Nice.
So we can do that, and then I can introduce you to OV if that's what you want, and we can talk about other stuff.
You have to have me online when what's she called? COE Jen.
Oh yeah. Well,
oh my god, she drives me nuts. This this ancient Pajit shit. Oh, you don't believe that, right?
No.
Good.
Look, I know you've had a lot of beers.
Yeah, that's
I can hear.
In my defense, I was at a wedding yesterday as best man, and I was drunk from that, and I just kept on drinking.
Oh dear. All right. Well, I should leave you to rest.
To my drinking.
Yes.
That's good.
Okay. Well thank
you have to have me on when she's on, because this has to go. This Aryan thing.
All
it
right.
has to go. She thinks of an Aryan as a Pajit, as some swarthy sort of Indian. Oh, well,
Yes.
I'm just talking on my ass. Sorry, Cap.
I know. Okay, well, thank you, Scythe, for.
And these idiots in the medium, vampires, sitting there smiling, delivering the message, vampires, like zombies, just go, oh, okay, yeah. They're nothing but meat puppets with mouths and vocal cords. Right now, the Fed is giving the public a large tube of KY jelly for when it comes time to bend over. Tom Keen's a moron. You know, we could take the analogy from The Exorcist to, you know, vampires. A wreath of garlic around you when he's talking. You won't get infected with the total bullshit that comes out of his mouth.
Well, I'm going to always advocate peaceful means. I do have 2 10-ounce silver bullets, 2 10-ounce silver bullets, 2 10-ounce silver bullets.
How the fuck are they defining inflation? The money supply is increasing at a parabolic rate. So it's the epitome of Orwellianism. You just make shit up and put labels on it, and that's what it is. Vampires. On the chance that something might seep into my brain that he says, I'll be more dumb for having listened to it. I mean, this is just idiotic. These guys are moronic. Bullshit, Bill. You're a moron.
Dave, I feel like you're holding back today.
I'm just tired of this crap. They're doing a brilliant job. They're like magicians, these vampires, deflecting your attention away from what's really going on, okay? Vampires. Like, it's good for the economy that I pay more next week for something that I need to have than I'm paying this week. That's good. How is that possibly good? And the banks are starting to collapse again. They're nothing but meat puppets with mouths and vocal cords.
Yeah, but that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of.
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy in her attack dog Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
They control the media, and the media is capable of making the sheeple believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walked through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating herself with a retard?